Uncover Poirot's Secrets, where Agatha Christie's Hercule Poirot reveals thrilling mysteries. In the shadowed halls of Blackthorn Manor, a chilling scream pierces the night, shattering the eerie revelry of the Ghoul Gala. A clairvoyant lies dead, a blackthorn berry clutched in her hand, a cryptic letter hinting at buried secrets. Who among the glittering guests, each hiding their own dark truths, wielded the fatal blow? Enter Hercule Poirot, the master detective whose little gray cells unravel a web of deceit, vengeance, and betrayal. As motives unravel and clues converge, one question haunts. What secret was worth killing for? Dive into this Agatha Christie-inspired mystery where every detail whispers of danger and the truth waits in the shadows. Chapter 1. The Invitation to Blackthorn Manor. In the waning days of October, when the air grew crisp and the leaves of the English countryside donned their fiery hues, the village of Netherby on the Wold lay under a quiet spell. The quaint hamlet nestled in the rolling hills of Kent was a place where time seemed to pause, where the church bell tolled with predictable solemnity, and where the locals exchanged pleasantries with the same unhurried rhythm as their forebears. Yet beneath this serene veneer a subtle unease stirred, for Blackthorn Manor, the grand estate perched on the village's northern edge, was preparing to host a most unusual event. The Ghoul Gala, a Halloween fete, promised to be unlike any other. Captain Arthur Hastings, ever the loyal companion to the great detective Hercule Poirot, sat in the cozy parlor of his London flat, a fire crackling in the hearth. He held in his hands an embossed invitation, its edges gilded and its script florid, penned in the meticulous hand of Lady Beatrice Ashford, mistress of Blackthorn Manor. The invitation was both a curiosity and a command, summoning guests to a night of revelry under the theme of Spectral Slaughter, a macabre nod to the season's ghostly lore. Hastings, a man of simple tastes and a soldier's straightforward disposition, found the theme rather garish, but the promise of a weekend in the countryside, coupled with the prospect of meeting old friends, piqued his interest. "My dear Hastings," came the voice of Hercule Poirot from across the room, "you hold that card as if it were a grenade about to detonate. What troubles you?" Poirot, diminutive in stature but vast in presence, sat in an armchair, his polished shoes gleaming, his mustache waxed to perfection. His eyes, sharp as a hawk's, studied Hastings with a blend of amusement and curiosity. The detective was, as ever, impeccably dressed, his suit tailored to a fault, his demeanor one of serene control. He sipped a tisane, the faint aroma of chamomile mingling with the wood smoke. "It's this invitation, Poirot," Hastings replied, waving the card. "Lady Ashford's hosting some sort of Hallowe'en gala at her manor. Sounds a bit morbid, don't you think? Spectral slaughter. Hardly the sort of thing one expects from a respectable widow." Poirot's lips twitched into a faint smile. The English, they have a peculiar fondness for the macabre at this time of year, no? Pumpkins carved into grimacing faces, tales of ghosts whispered by candlelight. It is perhaps a way to laugh at death, to tame its shadow. Tell me, who is this Lady Ashford, and why does her invitation cause you such disquiet? Hastings leaned back, folding his arms. "Beatrice Ashford is an old acquaintance from my army days. Her late husband, Sir Reginald, was a fine chap, made a fortune in shipping, left her a tidy sum in that sprawling manor. She's known for her eccentricities, always hosting these elaborate parties. But this one feels different. The wording's odd, almost theatrical. And the guest list, she's invited a rather mixed bunch. Politicians, artists, even a clairvoyant, if you can believe it. A clairvoyant? Poirot's eyebrows arched. Most intriguing. And you, my friend, are invited to this gala of ghouls. Will you attend? I'm tempted, Hastings admitted. It's been ages since I've seen Beatrice, and the manor's a sight to behold. But I'd feel better if you came along, Poirot. Your knack for sniffing out trouble might come in handy. Poirot set down his tisane, his fingers steepled in thought. Trouble, you say? Mon ami, you know that Hercule Poirot does not attend social gatherings merely for amusement, but a closed circle, a gathering of disparate souls, each with their secrets. This is a stage ripe for the drama of human nature. Very well, I shall accompany you. But mark my words, Hastings, where there is such a gathering, there is often more than meets the eye. The journey to Netherby-on-the-Wold was uneventful, the train rattling through fields dappled with autumn light. Blackthorn Manor loomed into view as their hired car wound up a gravel drive flanked by ancient yews. The estate was a Gothic marvel, its turrets piercing the sky, its stone facade softened by ivy. The windows glowed with the promise of warmth, yet the air carried a chill that seemed to whisper of secrets buried within the manor's walls. Lady Beatrice Ashford greeted them at the grand entrance, her presence as commanding as the manor itself. She was a woman in her late 50s, her silver hair swept into an elegant chignon, her eyes bright with a mischief that belied her age. Her dress, a deep velvet green, shimmered in the candlelight of the hall. "Captain Hastings!" she exclaimed, clasping his hands. "How delightful to see you after all these years. And this must be the famous Monsieur Poirot. Your reputation precedes you, sir." Poirot bowed, his mustache quivering with pleasure. "Madam, your hospitality is most gracious. I am eager to witness this Ghoul Gala of yours." Beatrice laughed, a sound like crystal. "Oh, it's a bit of fun, nothing more. A chance to shake off the dust of propriety and indulge in some harmless spookery. Come, let me introduce you to the others." The drawing room was a hive of chatter, its occupants a vivid tapestry of personalities. There was Sir Henry Whitmore, a bluff retired general with a penchant for brandy and a booming laugh. His wife, Clara, a nervous woman whose eyes darted like a cornered deer's. Miss Evelyn Carver, a painter of some renown, her bohemian attire clashing with the room's somber elegance. Dr. Felix Langston, a psychologist with a sharp gaze and a habit of scribbling notes. Madame Zelina, the clairvoyant, draped in scarves and exuding an air of mystic authority. And young Rupert Ashford, Beatrice's nephew, a charming but indolent fellow with a gambler's smile. Rounding out the party was Margaret Poole, Beatrice's loyal housekeeper, whose stern demeanor masked a fierce devotion to her mistress. Dinner was a lavish affair, the table groaning under the weight of pheasant, truffles, and a particularly fine claret. Conversation flowed, punctuated by laughter and the occasional barbed remark. Hastings noted the undercurrents. Clara Whitmore's discomfort when her husband mentioned their finances, Evelyn's pointed jabs at Rupert's lack of ambition, Madame Zelina's cryptic pronouncements about a shadow over the house. Poirot, ever observant, said little, his eyes flitting from face to face, cataloguing every gesture, every pause. As the clock struck 9, Beatrice rose, clapping her hands. "My dear guests, the Ghoul Gala begins. Tonight we embrace the spirit of Halloween. There will be games, tales of the supernatural, and perhaps a surprise or two. But first, a toast to secrets kept and truths revealed. The guests raised their glasses, but Hastings felt a prickle of unease. Poirot beside him murmured, "A toast to secrets, mon ami." "Most appropriate, for I suspect this manor holds many." The evening progressed with a theatrical flair. Madame Zelina performed a séance, her voice trembling as she claimed to commune with spirits. Sir Henry recounted a ghostly tale from his army days, his bluster masking a flicker of fear. Evelyn sketched caricatures of the guests, her pencil sharp and her wit sharper. Yet beneath the merriment, tension simmered. Hastings caught Rupert slipping a note to Clara, who flushed and tucked it away. Dr. Langston watched them both, his pen scratching furiously. As midnight approached, Beatrice announced the evening's centerpiece, a treasure hunt through the manor's darkened corridors, with clues hidden in its many rooms. Each guest was given a map and a riddle, their laughter echoing as they dispersed into the shadows. Hastings, paired with Poirot, found himself navigating a maze of oak-paneled halls, the air thick with the scent of old wood and wax. "Poirot," Hastings whispered, "do you think this is all just a game, or is something amiss?" Poirot's eyes gleamed in the candlelight. "A game, Hastings? Perhaps. But in every game there is a strategy, and in every strategy a motive. We shall see what this night reveals." They reached the library where their clue, a cryptic verse about a heart that beats no more, led them to a hidden compartment in a bookcase. Inside was a locket, its surface engraved with a rose. Poirot turned it over, his fingers tracing the delicate clasp. "Interesting," he murmured. "A locket, a heart, symbols of love or perhaps betrayal. We must keep this, Hastings." As they emerged into the hall, a scream shattered the silence, high and piercing, coming from the direction of the conservatory. Hastings' heart raced as he and Poirot hurried toward the sound, their footsteps echoing on the polished floor. The other guests converged, their faces pale in the flickering light. In the conservatory, beneath a canopy of exotic plants, lay Madame Zelina, her scarves askew, her eyes wide and unseeing. A thin trickle of blood seeped from a wound at her temple, and in her hand was clutched a single blackthorn berry, its dark sheen a stark contrast to her pallor. "Mon Dieu," Poirot whispered, kneeling beside her. "The Ghoul Gala has claimed its first victim." Word count, 1980. Chapter 2. The Shadow of Death. The conservatory of Blackthorn Manor, moments ago a stage for laughter and games, now bore the grim weight of tragedy. Madame Zelina lay motionless on the tiled floor, her vibrant scarves splayed like the wings of a fallen bird. The air, thick with the scent of damp earth and blooming orchids, seemed to hum with the shock of her death. The blackthorn berry clutched in her hand gleamed under the flickering light of a single candelabrum, its dark hue a silent accusation. The guests, gathered in a semicircle, stared in stunned silence, their faces a gallery of fear, suspicion, and disbelief. Hercule Poirot, his small frame taut with focus, knelt beside the body, his gloved fingers hovering over the wound at Madame Zelina's temple. His eyes, sharp and unyielding, scanned her form with the precision of a watchmaker. Captain Hastings stood nearby, his soldier's instincts urging him to act, yet he deferred to Poirot's methodical calm. The other guests, Lady Beatrice, Sir Henry, Clara Whitmore, Evelyn Carver, Dr. Felix Langston, Rupert Ashford, and Margaret Poole, clustered at the conservatory's edge, their breaths shallow, their eyes darting between the corpse and one another. "Mon Dieu," Poirot murmured, his voice a low ripple in the tense silence. "This is no accident, Hastings. The wound, it is precise, delivered with force. A blunt object, perhaps, but not one wielded in haste. This was murder." "Murder!" Lady Beatrice gasped, her hand flying to her throat. Her green velvet dress shimmered as she swayed, steadied by Rupert's quick grip on her arm. But this is madness. Who would do such a thing?" "That, madame, is what Hercule Poirot shall discover," Poirot replied, rising with a grace that belied the grimness of the moment. "But first we must preserve the scene. No one is to touch anything. Hastings, fetch the housekeeper. Madame Poole, is it not? And ask her to summon the local police." Hastings nodded, grateful for a task to shake off his unease. He hurried through the manor's darkened corridors, the echo of his footsteps mingling with the distant creak of settling wood. Margaret Poole was in the kitchen, her stern face pale as she scrubbed a copper pot with unnecessary vigor. When Hastings relayed Poirot's request, her lips tightened, but she nodded curtly and reached for the telephone. Back in the conservatory, Poirot had taken command with quiet authority. He directed Sir Henry to guard the door, ensuring no one entered or left while he examined the scene with meticulous care. The blackthorn berry intrigued him most. He plucked it from Madame Zelina's hand with a handkerchief, holding it to the light. "Curious," he said softly. "This berry, it is not merely decorative, it is a clue, perhaps a symbol. But of what?" Clara Whitmore, wringing her hands, whispered, "She said there was a shadow over the house. During the séance she spoke of it. Could she have foreseen this?" "Nonsense," Sir Henry barked, his mustache bristling. "The woman was a charlatan playing on our nerves, probably tripped and hit her head." Poirot's eyes flicked to the general, sharp with interest. "Tripped, you say? Yet the wound is not consistent with a fall. And this berry, why would a woman in her final moments clutch such a thing? No, Sir Henry, this was no accident." Evelyn Carver, her bohemian scarf loose around her shoulders, stepped forward, her voice sharp. "If it's murder, then one of us did it. We were all scattered about the house for that ridiculous treasure hunt. Anyone could have slipped in here." "Indeed, mademoiselle," Poirot said, his tone mild but his gaze piercing. "And that is why we must establish where each of you was at the moment of the crime. The time, it is now." He consulted his pocket watch. 12:15. The scream, it came at midnight precisely. "Where were you all between 11:30 and midnight?" A murmur rippled through the group, each guest exchanging wary glances. Lady Beatrice spoke first, her voice steady despite her pallor. "I was in the drawing room organizing the next set of clues. Margaret was with me until about 11:40 when she returned to the kitchen." Margaret, now back from her errand, nodded. "That's right, my lady. I was in the kitchen after that, alone." Sir Henry cleared his throat. "Clara and I were in the east wing near the billiard room. We were discussing a private matter." Clara flushed, avoiding his gaze, her fingers twisting a lace handkerchief. Evelyn rolled her eyes. "I was in the library sketching, alone before you ask. I didn't hear anything until the scream." Dr. Langston, his notebook now tucked away, adjusted his spectacles. "I was in the study, reviewing my notes from the séance. Madame Zelina's behavior intrigued me. Her claims of spiritual contact seemed Rehearsed. Rupert Ashford, leaning against a glass panel, flashed a disarming smile. I was in the West Wing, hunting for clues near the old chapel. Got lost, I'm afraid. These old houses are a maze. Poirot's mustache twitched, a sign Hastings recognized as the detective cataloging each statement for later scrutiny. Very well, Poirot said. The police will arrive soon, but until then we must observe and reflect. Hastings, assist me in examining the body further. As the guests dispersed to the drawing room under Sir Henry's reluctant supervision, Poirot and Hastings returned to Madame Zelina. The detective's fingers traced the air above her wound, noting its clean edges and the absence of bruising. A heavy object, smooth, not jagged, he mused. Perhaps a paperweight or a candlestick. But where is it now? Hastings glanced around the conservatory, its shelves lined with potted ferns and exotic blooms. A glint caught his eye, a brass statuette of a raven half hidden among the foliage. Poirot, look at this, he said, pointing but not touching. The statuette's base was smooth, its weight substantial enough to deliver a fatal blow. Poirot nodded approvingly. Bien, Hastings, a possible weapon, but we must not assume. The police will test for fingerprints, blood. For now, we note its position, near the door, easily accessible. The sound of tires on gravel announced the arrival of Inspector Japp, a familiar face from Scotland Yard, accompanied by a local constable. Japp, his coat dusted with autumn leaves, strode into the conservatory with his usual briskness. Poirot, Hastings, what's this I hear about a murder at a Hallowe'en party? You two have a knack for finding trouble. Trouble, my dear Japp, finds us, Poirot replied, his eyes gleaming. We have a murder, most deliberate. Madame Zelina, a clairvoyant, struck down with precision. The weapon, perhaps this statuette. The time, midnight. The suspects, all within this manner. Japp surveyed the scene, his expression darkening. Right then. Constable, secure the area. Poirot, I'll need statements from everyone. No one leaves until we've got this sorted. As Japp began organizing the investigation, Poirot drew Hastings aside. Mon ami, observe the guests closely. Their alibis, they are too neat, too convenient. And this berry, it troubles me. Blackthorn, it is a plant of folklore, of protection and peril. Why did she hold it so tightly? Hastings frowned. You think it's a message? Perhaps, Poirot said, his voice low. Or a taunt. The killer, they wish to play a game with us. But Hercule Poirot does not lose at games of the mind. The guests were herded into the drawing room where Japp began his interrogations. Poirot, however, lingered in the conservatory, his eyes roving over the plants, the tiles, the shadows. He paused at a small table near the body where a glass of wine sat untouched, its surface dusted with a faint powder. Hastings, he called softly. This glass, smell it but do not touch. Hastings leaned in, detecting a bitter undertone beneath the wine's aroma. Poison? He whispered. Possibly, Poirot said, or a sedative to ensure the victim was vulnerable. We must have it analyzed. But note, Hastings, the glass is half full. She drank, but not enough to collapse. The blow came first. As the night wore on, the manor seemed to close in around them, its walls whispering of secrets. The guests' alibis held, but Poirot's instincts told him otherwise. Clara's nervousness, Rupert's charm, Evelyn's defiance, each was a thread in a tapestry of deceit, and the blackthorn berry, small and sinister, lay in Poirot's handkerchief, a riddle yet to be solved. Japp will follow the obvious path. Poirot told Hastings as they joined the others. "But we shall follow the path of the little gray cells. The truth it hides in the details, the glance, the gesture, the lie that betrays the heart." Word count, 1980. Chapter 3. The Arrival of Poirot's Method. The drawing room of Blackthorn Manor, bathed in the dim glow of oil lamps, seemed to shrink under the weight of suspicion. The guests, seated on plush velvet chairs and a sagging chaise longue, shifted uneasily, their earlier conviviality replaced by a taut silence. The fire in the hearth crackled, casting shadows that danced across the oak-paneled walls, as if mocking the living with their restless energy. Inspector Japp, his notebook open and pencil poised, stood at the room's center, his authoritative presence a stark contrast to the delicate figure of Hercule Poirot, who sat quietly in a corner, his eyes gleaming like polished jet. Captain Hastings, standing near the fireplace, felt the tension coil tighter with each passing moment. The murder of Madame Zelina had shattered the illusion of the Ghoul Gala's frivolity. And now, with the local constable guarding the conservatory and Japp methodically questioning each guest, the manor felt like a gilded cage. Hastings glanced at Poirot, whose stillness belied the whirlwind of thought he knew was churning within the detective's mind. Poirot's little gray cells, as he so often called them, were already at work, piecing together the mosaic of clues left in the wake of the clairvoyant's death. Japp, clearing his throat, addressed the room. "Right, let's have order, please. I've got your initial statements, but I'll need more details. Nobody leaves this manor until we've got a clearer picture of what happened. Monsieur Poirot, I assume you'll be poking your nose in as usual?" Poirot inclined his head, his mustache twitching with a faint smile. "My dear Inspector, I am but a humble observer here to assist. The nose, it does not poke. It merely sniffs the truth." A ripple of nervous laughter broke the tension, though Clara Whitmore's giggle bordered on hysteria. Sir Henry shot her a stern look, his hand tightening on his brandy glass. Lady Beatrice, seated near the grand piano, maintained her composure, though her fingers toyed with the emerald brooch at her throat, a nervous tick Hastings noted with interest. "Very well," Japp continued. "Let's establish the timeline again. The scream was heard at midnight. Madame Zelina was found dead in the conservatory, struck on the temple. You were all supposedly scattered about the manor for this treasure hunt. I want exact movements from 11:30 to midnight. No omissions." Poirot raised a hand, his voice soft but commanding. "If I may, Inspector, permit me to pose a question to our friends here. It is not only where you were, but what you saw, what you heard. The smallest detail, it may be the key to unlock this mystery." Japp grunted but nodded. "Go on, then, but keep it quick." Poirot rose, his movements deliberate, and paced slowly before the guests, his eyes sweeping over each face. "Madame Zelina, she was a woman of theatrics, no? A clairvoyant claiming to see beyond the veil. Yet someone in this room saw fit to end her performance permanently. I ask you now, what did you observe in the moments before the scream? A sound, a shadow, a glance that seemed out of place?" Lady Beatrice spoke first, her voice steady but her eyes haunted. "I told you I was in the drawing room until 11:40 arranging clues. I heard nothing unusual, just the usual creaks of an old house. Margaret was with me until she left for the kitchen." Margaret Poole, standing stiffly near the door, nodded. Aye, that's right. I was in the kitchen after, preparing tea trays. I heard no scream until the rest of you did. Sir Henry puffed out his chest. Clara and I were in the billiard room, as I said. We were discussing investments. No one else was about, and we heard nothing until that dreadful noise. Clara's hands twisted her handkerchief into knots. It's true, she whispered. Just us talking. I thought I heard footsteps in the hall at one point, but it was faint. Poirot's eyes narrowed. Footsteps, Madame Whitmore, from which direction? Clara hesitated, glancing at her husband. I'm not sure. Toward the conservatory, perhaps, but it was so faint I could be mistaken. Interesting, Poirot murmured, turning to Evelyn Carver. And you, mademoiselle, in the library, sketching. Did your artist's eye catch anything unusual? Evelyn's lips curled into a sardonic smile. Only the usual posturing of this lot. I was alone, as I said. The library's on the other side of the house from the conservatory. I heard nothing, saw nothing, until the scream brought me running. Dr. Felix Langston adjusted his spectacles, his voice measured. I was in the study, as I mentioned. I did notice a light flickering in the corridor around 11:45, as if someone were carrying a candle. But I saw no one. Rupert Ashford, lounging against the piano, shrugged. I was lost in the west wing near the chapel. Old houses like this play tricks on you, creaks, drafts, shadows. I didn't hear or see anything odd until the scream. Poirot's gaze lingered on Rupert, noting the young man's easy charm and the faint tremor in his hand. Merci, monsieur. And now a question for all. Did any of you speak with Madame Zelina after the séance, before the treasure hunt began? A chorus of denials followed, each guest shaking their head. But Hastings caught a flicker of unease in Clara's eyes, and Poirot, ever perceptive, noticed it too. He said nothing, merely nodding as if satisfied, though Hastings knew his friend was far from it. Japp, growing impatient, clapped his hands. Right. I'll need to search the manor and take fingerprints. Constable, start in the conservatory. Poirot, any other bright ideas? Only one for now, Poirot said, producing the blackthorn berry still wrapped in his handkerchief. This berry found in the victim's hand. Does it mean anything to any of you? Blackthorn. It is a plant steeped in folklore. Protection, curses, the boundary between life and death. Lady Beatrice paled slightly. Blackthorn grows wild around the manor. It's symbolic, I suppose, for a Hallowe'en party, but I don't see why she'd hold one. Perhaps she was trying to tell us something, Dr. Langston suggested, his tone clinical. A final act of her clairvoyant charade. Or a message from her killer, Poirot countered softly. We shall see. As Japp and the constable began their search, Poirot drew Hastings into the corridor. Mon ami, did you notice the alibis? They are like a well-rehearsed play, each part perfectly delivered. Yet there is discord. Clara's footsteps, Langston's flickering light, Rupert's trembling hand. These are the notes that do not harmonize. Hastings frowned. You think they're lying? Not all, perhaps, but some, Poirot said. And the glass of wine with its bitter scent, we must learn if it was meant for Madame Zelina alone, or if another was the target. Come, let us explore the conservatory again while Japp is occupied. The conservatory was colder now, the air heavy with the scent of death. The constable stood guard, but Poirot's authority persuaded him to step aside. Poirot examined the brass raven statuette, noting its position near the door. Accessible to all, he mused, Yet why leave it here so obvious? The killer, they are bold or careless. Hastings pointed to a trail of dirt on the tiles leading from the body to a side door that opened onto the garden. Look, Poirot. Someone came in or out this way. Bien vu, Hastings, Poirot exclaimed, crouching to inspect the dirt. Fresh soil, likely from the garden, and see, here, a partial footprint, small, perhaps a woman's. We must compare it to the shoes of our guests. As they followed the trail to the door, Poirot paused at a cluster of blackthorn bushes just outside, their berries dark against the moonlight. The berry in her hand, he said, it was plucked fresh, not dried. The killer. They were in the garden perhaps moments before the murder. Back in the drawing room, Jap was collecting personal effects for fingerprinting, including the guests' shoes. Poirot whispered to Hastings, "Observe their faces, mon ami, the one who trembles at the mention of the garden. They are our first thread to unravel." As the night deepened, Blackthorn Manor seemed to pulse with secrets, its corridors hiding truths that only Poirot's relentless logic could uncover. The blackthorn berry, the bitter wine, the raven statuette. Each was a piece of the puzzle, and Hastings knew that Poirot would not rest until they formed a complete picture. Word count, 1980. Chapter 4. The questions deepened the air, and Blackthorn Manor seemed to thicken as the night wore on. The grandeur of its oak-paneled walls and crystal chandeliers now overshadowed by the specter of murder. In the drawing room, the guests sat in uneasy silence, their faces etched with varying degrees of fear, defiance, and exhaustion. The fire had dwindled to glowing embers, casting a ruddy glow that did little to dispel the chill of suspicion. Inspector Jap, his notebook now filled with scribbled timelines and alibis, paced before the group, his brow furrowed. Hercule Poirot, however, remained seated, his small frame composed, his eyes darting from one guest to another like a hawk assessing its prey. Captain Hastings, standing near the window, felt the weight of the moment, knowing that Poirot's methodical mind was already sifting through the web of half-truths spun in the previous hours. Jap, pausing his pacing, addressed the room with a gruff authority. "Right. We've got the basics down, but I'm not satisfied. Someone in this room knows more than they're letting on. Madame Zelina was killed at midnight, struck with a blunt object, likely that raven statuette, and we've got a glass of wine that smells off. Now I want to hear about your interactions with the victim. Did anyone speak to her privately after the séance before the treasure hunt?" A murmur of denials rippled through the group, but Poirot raised a hand, his voice cutting through the noise like a blade. "Pardon, Inspector, but allow me to refine the question. It is not only what was said, but what was seen. Madame Zelina, she was a woman who thrived on attention, none. Who among you noticed her behavior this evening, her mood, her movements, her words?" Lady Beatrice, her emerald brooch glinting as she adjusted her posture, spoke first. She was theatrical as always. During the séance, she spoke of a shadow over the house, which I thought was just her usual nonsense to set the mood, after she mingled chatting with everyone. I saw her speaking with Rupert near the dining room door around 10:30. Rupert Ashford, lounging against the piano, raised an eyebrow. "Me?" "Oh yes, she cornered me about my aura. Said it was clouded, needed cleansing. Utter rot, of course. I humored her for a minute, then excused myself to get another drink. Poirot's eyes narrowed. "And where did you go after this conversation, Monsieur Ashford?" "To the library for a smoke," Rupert replied smoothly. "I was there until the treasure hunt started at 11. Evelyn Carver, her bohemian scarf now knotted tightly, snorted. "Convenient. I was in the library from 10 onward and I didn't see you, Rupert." Rupert's smile faltered, but he recovered quickly. "Must have been a different corner. It's a big room, Evelyn." Poirot turned to Evelyn. "Mademoiselle Carver, you were sketching, oui? Did you see Madame Zelina at all after the séance?" Evelyn's eyes flicked to the floor, then back to Poirot. "I saw her pass the library door around 10:45, heading toward the conservatory. She was alone, carrying that ridiculous crystal ball of hers. I thought she was setting up some dramatic reveal for the gala." Dr. Felix Langston, his notebook now tucked into his pocket, cleared his throat. "I observed her during the séance, of course. Her performance was calculated. Gestures too precise, words too rehearsed. Afterward, I saw her speaking with Clara in the hall around 10:15. Clara seemed upset. Clara Whitmore gasped, her handkerchief falling to her lap. That's not true, I mean, yes, she spoke to me, but it was nothing. She offered to read my palm, said something about my future being uncertain. I told her I wasn't interested and walked away." Sir Henry's face reddened. "What's this, Clara? You didn't mention any palm-reading nonsense." Clara's eyes welled with tears. "It was nothing, Henry. I didn't want to upset you. She was just being her usual meddlesome self." Poirot's mustache twitched, a sign Hastings recognized as the detective noting a crack in the facade. "Madam Whitmore, where did this conversation take place, and where did you go afterward?" "In the hall near the dining room," Clara said, her voice trembling. "I went to the billiard room after to calm down. Henry joined me later." Poirot turned to Margaret Poole, who stood rigidly by the door. "And you, Madame Poole? You were with Lady Beatrice until 11:40, then in the kitchen. Did you see Madame Zelina at any point?" Margaret's lips pursed. "I saw her in the dining room around 10, fussing with her scarves and muttering about spirits. I paid her no mind. My duties kept me busy." Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. "Merci. Now let us consider the glass of wine found near the body. Who poured it and when?" Lady Beatrice frowned. "The wine was served during dinner, but we all had our own glasses. I don't recall anyone taking one to the conservatory. Perhaps she poured it herself." "Unlikely," Poirot said. "The glass was half full and the wine bore a bitter scent, suggesting a substance, perhaps a sedative or poison. We must determine who had access to her glass and when." Japp, growing impatient, interjected. "We're testing the wine for fingerprints and residue, Poirot. But I need more than your theories. I want hard evidence. Constable, have we got those shoe prints yet?" The constable, a young man with a nervous demeanor, entered with a report. "Sir, we've matched the partial print in the conservatory to a woman's shoe, size 5. We're checking the guests' shoes now." Clara Whitmore paled, her hands clutching her skirt. Evelyn's eyes narrowed, while Lady Beatrice's fingers stilled on her brooch. Poirot, observing this, said nothing but gestured for Hastings to follow him back to the conservatory. Away from the drawing-room's tension, Poirot examined the scene again, his gloved hands tracing the air above the raven statuette. "Hastings, consider the footprint. A woman's shoe, size 5. Clara, Evelyn, and Lady Beatrice are all possibilities, but we must not assume. The killer may have worn another's shoes to mislead us. Hastings nodded, his mind racing. And the wine? If it was poisoned, someone must have tampered with it during the evening. Précisément, Poirot said. The wine, the berry, the statuette, these are not random. They are pieces of a puzzle, each chosen with care. The killer, they wish to tell a story, but we must read it correctly. They returned to the drawing room where Japp was questioning Rupert about his movements. Poirot interrupted gently. Inspector, a moment, I have a request. May we examine the personal effects of Madame Zelina? Her bag, her jewelry? Perhaps they hold a clue. Japp sighed but nodded. Fine, but don't touch anything without gloves. Constable, fetch her things from her room. The constable returned with a small velvet bag, its contents spilling onto a table. A crystal pendant, a notebook filled with cryptic symbols, a vial of lavender oil, and a folded letter sealed with wax. Poirot's eyes gleamed as he opened the letter, careful not to tear the seal. It read, "The shadow knows your secret. Meet me in the conservatory at 11:30. Do not fail." The letter was unsigned, the handwriting unfamiliar. A gasp escaped Clara, quickly stifled, while Rupert's jaw tightened. Poirot folded the letter, his expression serene but his mind clearly racing. "This letter," he said, "it suggests Madame Zelina was lured to her death. Someone in this room wrote it or knows who did. I ask you now, who among you had a secret worth killing for?" The room fell silent, the weight of Poirot's words pressing down like a storm cloud. Hastings watched the guests, noting Clara's trembling hands, Evelyn's defiant stare, and Rupert's forced nonchalance. Even Lady Beatrice, usually so composed, seemed shaken. Japp, seizing the moment, declared, "Right, no one's going anywhere until we get answers. Poirot, you're sure this letter's genuine?" "As genuine as the fear in this room," Poirot replied. "The truth, it is close, Inspector. But we must tread carefully, lest it slip through our fingers." As the clock struck 2, Blackthorn Manor seemed to hold its breath, its secrets coiled tightly within its walls. Poirot's gaze lingered on the guests, his little gray cells weaving a tapestry of motive and opportunity, ready to unravel the mystery of the Ghoul Gala's spectral slaughter. Word count, 1980. Chapter 5. The Red Herrings. The drawing room of Blackthorn Manor, with its heavy velvet drapes and flickering lamplight, seemed to pulse with a quiet menace as the early hours of the morning crept on. The guests, now weary from Inspector Japp's relentless questioning and Hercule Poirot's piercing scrutiny, sat in a strained tableau, their earlier facades of politeness crumbling under the weight of suspicion. The discovery of the mysterious letter in Madame Zelina's possessions had cast a new shadow over the Ghoul Gala, and the air was thick with unspoken accusations. Captain Hastings, standing near the fireplace, felt the tension like a taut wire ready to snap. Poirot, seated with his hands folded neatly in his lap, appeared serene. But Hastings knew his friend's mind was a whirlwind of deduction, sifting through the tangle of alibis and motives. Inspector Japp, his patience wearing thin, slapped his notebook shut and addressed the group. "This letter changes things. Someone lured Madame Zelina to the conservatory, and I'm betting they're in this room. I want the truth, and I want it now. Who wrote it?" A heavy silence followed, broken only by the faint crackle of the dying fire. Clara Whitmore's hands trembled as she clutched her handkerchief, her eyes darting to her husband. Sir Henry, his face flushed with indignation, growled, "This is preposterous. You're accusing us based on a scrap of paper? That woman was a fraud. Probably wrote it herself to stir up drama." Poirot's mustache twitched, a subtle signal of his amusement at Sir Henry's bluster. "A fraud, perhaps, Sir Henry, but a dead one. The letter, it is not the work of Madame Zelina. The handwriting, it is precise, deliberate, not her flamboyant script. No, someone wished her to be in the conservatory at 11:30, and there she met her end." Japp turned to the constable, who stood awkwardly by the door. "Any progress on those fingerprints or the wine analysis?" The constable shook his head. "Not yet, sir. The lab's working on it, but it'll take time. The raven statuette had smudges, no clear prints. The wine's being tested for toxins." Poirot rose, his small frame commanding the room's attention. "While we await the science, let us employ the little gray cells. The letter speaks of a secret. Madame Zelina, she claimed to see beyond the veil, to know the hidden truths of others. Who among you feared her knowledge? Who had a secret she might have uncovered?" Evelyn Carver, her bohemian air now tinged with defiance, leaned forward. "You're barking up the wrong tree, Monsieur Poirot. Zelina was a charlatan preying on gullible fools. If she knew any secrets, they were guesses, nothing more. I had no reason to fear her." "Yet you saw her pass the library door," Poirot said, his tone mild but his eyes sharp. "Alone, you say, with her crystal ball. Did you follow her, mademoiselle, to ensure her guesses remained unspoken?" Evelyn's cheeks flushed. "I did no such thing. I stayed in the library until the scream." Poirot turned to Clara, whose pallor had deepened. "Madame Whitmore, you spoke with Madame Zelina about your future. She said it was uncertain. Did she hint at something more personal?" Clara's voice was barely a whisper. She said I was hiding something, that it would come to light. But it was nonsense. I told her to stop." Sir Henry slammed his fist on the arm of his chair. "Enough of this. My wife's done nothing wrong. You're hounding her over a palm-reading trick?" Poirot's gaze shifted to Rupert Ashford, whose casual demeanor seemed forced. "And you, Monsieur Ashford, you spoke of a clouded aura. Did Madame Zelina press you further? Did she know something you wished to keep hidden?" Rupert's smile was tight. "She was fishing, that's all. I'm an open book, Poirot. No secrets here." Dr. Felix Langston, adjusting his spectacles, interjected, "If I may, Monsieur Poirot, I believe Madame Zelina's death may be tied to her profession. As a psychologist, I observed her closely. Her visions were calculated, designed to provoke reactions. She may have pushed someone too far." "An astute observation," Poirot said, "but it does not answer who. Let us consider the physical evidence. The footprint in the conservatory, small, a woman's size 5. Madame Whitmore, Mademoiselle Carver, Madame Ashford. Your shoes, they are of this size, non?" Clara gasped. Evelyn scowled, and Lady Beatrice's hand stilled on her brooch. "My shoes are size 5, Beatrice admitted, her voice steady. "But so are half the women's in England. Surely you don't suspect me, Monsieur Poirot?" "Not suspect, madam, merely observe," Poirot said. "And the blackthorn berry, does it hold meaning for any of you beyond its folklore?" Margaret Poole, who had been silent, spoke up, her voice clipped. "Blackthorn grows wild in the garden, it's common enough. But if she was holding it, maybe she picked it herself, wandering outside." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Possible, but unlikely. The berry was fresh, not crushed, as if placed in her hand." A message, perhaps, or a signature. Japp, exasperated, interrupted. Poirot, you're spinning webs again. Let's focus on the obvious. Rupert, you were in the West Wing, near the chapel, but Evelyn says you weren't in the library. Where exactly were you at 11:30? Rupert hesitated, his charm faltering. I was near the chapel, as I said. I got turned around, ended up in the old servants' corridor. I didn't see Zelina, I swear. Japp's eyes narrowed. The servants' corridor runs parallel to the conservatory. Convenient place to slip in and out unnoticed. Rupert's face reddened. Now, see here, Inspector, I'm no killer, I was just lost. Poirot raised a hand, silencing the room. Let us not leap to conclusions, Inspector. Monsieur Ashford's alibi, it is weak, yes, but so are others. We must look beyond the obvious. Hastings, come. Let us examine Madame Zelina's notebook. Leaving Japp to continue his interrogations, Poirot and Hastings retreated to a small study where the constable had placed Madame Zelina's velvet bag. Poirot opened the notebook, its pages filled with cryptic symbols, astrological charts, and shorthand notes. One entry caught his eye. R.A. owes much, fears exposure. C.W. hides pain. E.C. masks truth. B.A. guards the past. Hastings, Poirot said, his voice low. These initials, Rupert Ashford, Clara Whitmore, Evelyn Carver, Beatrice Ashford. Madame Zelina, she was not merely guessing. She was collecting secrets, perhaps to use them. Blackmail? Hastings asked, his eyes widening. Possibly, Poirot said. Or leverage. She was a woman who played with fire, and someone ensured she was burned. They returned to the drawing room where Japp was now questioning Margaret Poole about the wine. You were in the kitchen, Japp said. Did you see anyone tampering with drinks? Margaret's eyes were steely. No, sir. I poured the wine for dinner, but after that the guests helped themselves. I was busy with my duties. Poirot interjected, holding up the notebook. Madame Poole, did Madame Zelina ever speak to you of secrets, of things she knew about the household? Margaret's lips tightened. She tried once, said she sensed disharmony in the manor. I told her to keep her nonsense to herself. Poirot nodded, his mind clearly racing. He turned to the group. Mes amis, the hour grows late, but the truth, it draws near. I ask you to reflect, what did Madame Zelina know that made her a threat? The answer lies not in what you say, but in what you conceal. As the guests exchanged wary glances, Hastings caught a fleeting look between Clara and Rupert, a glance of fear, or perhaps guilt. Poirot too noticed, his eyes narrowing. The red herrings, Rupert's weak alibi, Clara's nervousness, the convenient footprint, were piling up. But Poirot's method was to see through the fog of misdirection to the truth beneath. The clock chimed 3 and Blackthorn Manor seemed to hold its breath. Its secrets locked in the hearts of its occupants, waiting for Poirot's relentless logic to set them free. Word count, 1980. Chapter 6. A Clue in Detail. The oppressive atmosphere of Blackthorn Manor seemed to deepen as the night stretched toward dawn, the grand drawing room now a stage for suspicion and dread. The guests, their faces drawn from fatigue and fear, sat in uneasy clusters, their earlier camaraderie replaced by guarded glances and terse silences. The fire had long since dwindled, leaving only a faint glow to battle the shadows creeping across the oak-paneled walls. Inspector Japp, his patience fraying like an old rope, continued his dogged questioning. But it was Hercule Poirot, seated with serene precision, who commanded the room's true attention. His eyes, sharp as a blade, missed nothing. and Captain Hastings, standing by the window, knew that Poirot's little gray cells were weaving a tapestry from the threads of clues scattered across the Ghoul Gala's grim tableau. Poirot, his gloved hands folded neatly, rose and addressed the group with a calm that belied the gravity of the moment. "Mes amis, we stand at a crossroads. Madame Zelina lies dead, struck down with a raven statuette, a blackthorn berry clutched in her hand, a glass of tainted wine nearby. A letter lured her to the conservatory, speaking of a secret. These are not random acts, but deliberate strokes in a painting of murder. Let us now examine a detail. A small thing, perhaps, but in its precision lies the truth." Jap, rubbing his temples, sighed. "Poirot, we've been over the alibis, the footprints, the letter. What's this detail you're on about now?" Poirot's mustache twitched, a faint smile playing at its edges. "Patience, Inspector. The detail, it is this. The locket we found during the treasure hunt hidden in the library. A locket with a rose engraved, a symbol of love, or perhaps betrayal. Who among you knows of this locket?" He produced the locket from his pocket, holding it aloft in his handkerchief. The room fell silent, the guest's eyes fixed on the gleaming object. Clara Whitmore's breath hitched, her hands clenching her handkerchief. Rupert Ashford's casual posture stiffened, and Lady Beatrice's fingers paused on her emerald brooch. Even Evelyn Carver, usually so defiant, leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. Lady Beatrice spoke first, her voice measured but strained. "A locket? I've never seen it before. It could belong to anyone, perhaps one of the staff or a guest from a previous party." "Non, madame," Poirot said, his tone gentle but firm. "This locket was placed in the library as part of your treasure hunt, was it not? Yet it was not listed among the clues you provided. How did it come to be there?" Beatrice's eyes flickered with unease. I don't know. I prepared the clues myself, but the locket wasn't part of them. Someone must have added it." Poirot turned to Hastings, who stood ready to assist. "Mon ami, you found the locket in a hidden compartment. Describe it again, s'il vous plaît." Hastings cleared his throat, recalling the moment vividly. "It was in the library behind a false panel in the bookcase. The clue led us there, a riddle about a heart that beats no more. The locket was silver, engraved with a rose, and it had a clasp that looked worn, as if opened often." "Précisément," Poirot said, opening the locket with a delicate touch. Inside was a faded photograph of a young woman, her features striking but unfamiliar. "This photograph, it is not of Madame Zelina nor of any guest here. Yet it was placed where it would be found. Why?" Dr. Felix Langston, his analytical mind engaged, leaned forward. "A memento, perhaps. Someone's lost love or a family member. It could be unrelated to the murder. Or it could be the key," Poirot countered. "A locket is personal, intimate. It speaks of a connection, a secret perhaps that Madame Zelina threatened to expose." Clara Whitmore's voice trembled as she spoke. I don't know that locket, but Madame Zelina mentioned a rose during the séance. She said something about a rose that withers in shadow. I thought it was just her nonsense." Sir Henry's face darkened. "Clara, you keep mentioning this woman's ramblings. What else did she say to you?" "Nothing," Clara cried, her voice breaking. "She was trying to unsettle me, that's all. I didn't take her seriously." Poirot's gaze shifted to Rupert, whose fingers drummed nervously on the piano. "Monsieur Ashford, you were near the library earlier this evening, no? Did you perhaps place this locket in the bookcase?" Rupert's laugh was forced. Me? Why would I? I was lost in the West Wing, remember? Besides, I've no use for trinkets like that. Evelyn Carver snorted. You're always hiding something, Rupert. Don't play the innocent. Enough, Japp barked. Poirot, where are you going with this? The locket's a distraction. We've got a murder weapon, a footprint, and a poisoned glass. Let's stick to those. Poirot inclined his head. The locket, Inspector, is no distraction. It is a thread in the tapestry, but let us explore another detail. The glass of wine. Madame Poole, you said the guests helped themselves after dinner. Where were the wine bottles kept? Margaret Poole's expression was stern. In the dining room, on a sideboard. Anyone could have taken a glass or poured more. I wasn't watching. Poirot nodded, then turned to the group. And who among you poured wine for Madame Zelina after dinner? A chorus of denials followed, but Poirot's eyes lingered on Clara, who shrank under his gaze. Madame Whitmore, you were seen speaking with her near the dining room. Did you offer her a drink? Clara shook her head vehemently. No, I didn't touch the wine. I was just trying to get away from her. Poirot's attention shifted to the conservatory door where the constable had returned with a report. Sir, the lab confirmed the wine contains a sedative, chloral hydrate, enough to knock someone out but not kill. No fingerprints on the glass, though. It was wiped clean. Wiped clean, Poirot murmured. A careful killer, then. The sedative was meant to weaken Madame Zelina to ensure the blow was fatal. But why the blackthorn berry? Let us return to the garden. Leaving Japp to continue his inquiries, Poirot and Hastings slipped out to the conservatory, where the air was heavy with the scent of earth and death. The blackthorn bushes outside the side door drew Poirot's attention. He crouched, examining the ground, and pointed to a broken twig. See, Hastings, this branch was snapped recently. Someone stood here, perhaps watching, perhaps waiting. Hastings frowned. You think the killer came from the garden, struck her, then placed the berry in her hand? Possible, Poirot said. But the berry, it is too deliberate. It is a signature, a taunt. The killer wishes us to see their cleverness. They returned to the drawing room, where Japp was now questioning Evelyn about her sketching. Poirot interrupted gently. Mademoiselle Carver, your sketches from this evening, may we see them? Evelyn hesitated, then handed over her sketchbook. The pages were filled with caricatures of the guests, each capturing a moment of their evening. One sketch stood out. Madame Zelina, her scarves flowing, standing near the conservatory door, a shadowy figure behind her. The figure was indistinct, but its posture suggested stealth. Who is this? Poirot asked, pointing to the shadow. Evelyn shrugged. I don't know. I saw her from the library window just before the treasure hunt. There was someone behind her, but I couldn't make them out. I thought it was part of the game. Poirot's eyes gleamed. A shadow indeed. This sketch, mademoiselle, is a clue of great value. It tells us the killer was near the conservatory before the murder. As the guests absorbed this, Poirot turned to Japp. Inspector, we must search the rooms of each guest. The locket, the letter, the berry, they point to a secret, and secrets are often hidden in private spaces. Japp nodded, though his expression was skeptical. All right, Poirot, but I'm keeping my eye on Rupert and Clara. Their stories don't add up. As the search was organized, Hastings leaned toward Poirot. The locket, the sketch, the berry, do you think they're all connected? Oui, mon ami, Poirot whispered. They are the notes of a symphony, and Hercule Poirot shall conduct it to its crescendo. The truth it is near, but we must tread carefully through. The maze of lies. The clock struck 4, and Blackthorn Manor's secrets seemed to tighten their grip, waiting for Poirot's relentless logic to pry them loose. Word count, 1980. Chapter 7. More lies. Surface. The first hints of dawn crept through the heavy drapes of Blackthorn Manor's drawing room, casting pale, ghostly light over the assembled guests. The air was thick with exhaustion and suspicion, the once vibrant atmosphere of the Ghoul Gala now a distant memory. The guests, their faces etched with strain, sat in uneasy silence, their eyes flitting between Inspector Japp's stern presence and Hercule Poirot's serene, watchful figure. Captain Hastings, standing near the grand piano, felt the weight of the night pressing down, each new revelation tightening the knot of tension in the room. Poirot, his hands folded neatly, seemed untouched by fatigue, his little gray cells humming with relentless precision as he sifted through the growing web of clues. Inspector Japp, his notebook now dog-eared from constant use, paced before the group, his voice sharp with frustration. "We've got a murder weapon, a sedative-laced wineglass, a mysterious letter, a locket, and a blasted blackthorn berry. And now this sketch of a shadow behind Madame Zelina. Someone's lying, and I'm fed up with the half-truths. I want answers. Now." Poirot raised a hand, his calm authority cutting through Japp's agitation. "Mon cher Inspector, the truth, it is like a fine tapestry. Each thread must be examined before the pattern emerges. Let us explore a new thread. The secrets Madame Zelina claimed to know. Her notebook suggests she was aware of indiscretions. Let us speak plainly. Who among you feared her knowledge?" The room bristled with unease. Clara Whitmore's hands twisted her handkerchief into a tight knot, her eyes darting to her husband. Sir Henry's face reddened, his mustache quivering with indignation. "This is outrageous. Are you suggesting we're all hiding something? That woman was a fraud preying on weak minds." "Perhaps," Poirot said, his tone mild but his gaze piercing. "Yet she is dead, and someone ensured her silence. Let us consider her notebook. It mentions RAO's much, CW hides pain, EC masks truth, BA guards the past. These initials point to Rupert Ashford, Clara Whitmore, Evelyn Carver, and Lady Beatrice. What did she know about you?" Rupert Ashford, leaning against the piano, forced a laugh. "Oh, much? I owe a few pounds at the club, perhaps, but nothing worth killing over. She was fishing, Poirot, trying to sound profound." Evelyn Carver's eyes flashed. "And masks truth? Typical. She thought everyone was hiding something. I'm an artist. I'm open about my disdain for this lot. No secrets here." Lady Beatrice, her fingers still on her emerald brooch, spoke softly. "Guards the past could mean anything. My past is no mystery. I'm a widow, living quietly. If she thought otherwise, she was mistaken." Clara's voice trembled. "Hides pain? I don't know what she meant. She said I was troubled, but it was just her nonsense, I swear it." Poirot's mustache twitched, a sign Hastings recognized as the detective noting the cracks in their defenses. "Madame Whitmore, you seem most distressed. Let us return to your conversation with Madame Zelina. She spoke of your future, of a secret. What did she say exactly?" Clara's eyes filled with tears, and she glanced at Sir Henry, who looked ready to explode. She said I was carrying a burden, that it would destroy me if I didn't confess. But I didn't know what she meant. I told her to leave me alone." Sir Henry slammed his fist on the arm of his chair. "Enough of this. Clara's done nothing wrong. You're hounding her over a charlatan's ravings." Poirot turned to Dr. Felix Langston, who had been quietly observing. "Monsieur Langston, as a psychologist, you studied Madame Zelina's behavior. Did you notice her pressing anyone in particular?" Langston adjusted his spectacles, his voice measured. She was manipulative, yes. I saw her corner Clara after the séance and later Rupert. Her questions were pointed, designed to provoke. She seemed particularly interested in Clara's reaction, almost as if she knew something specific. Clara gasped, her face paling. That's not true. She was just trying to upset me. Poirot's eyes narrowed. And why, Madame Whitmore, were you so easily upset? What burden did she sense? Before Clara could respond, Margaret Poole, standing rigidly by the door, spoke up, her voice cold. If I may, sir, Madame Zelina was always poking her nose where it didn't belong. She asked me about the manor's history, about old scandals. I told her to mind her own business. Poirot's gaze shifted to Margaret. And what scandals did she inquire about, Madame Poole? Margaret's lips pursed. Old gossip, nothing more. Stories about Sir Reginald's business dealings or Lady Beatrice's family. Ancient history not worth repeating. Lady Beatrice's hand tightened on her brooch. My family? What nonsense. My late husband's affairs were in order, and I've no secrets to hide. Poirot nodded, but his eyes gleamed with interest. Let us explore another detail, the servants' corridor near the conservatory. Monsieur Ashford, you said you were lost there. Did you see anyone else? Rupert's smile was strained. No one, I swear. It was dark, and I was trying to find my way back to the main hall. Japp, seizing the opportunity, interjected. That corridor's a perfect route to the conservatory. Quiet, out of sight. You could have slipped in, struck her, and been back before anyone noticed. Rupert's face reddened. That's absurd. I'm no murderer. Poirot raised a hand, silencing the room. Let us not accuse prematurely, Inspector. Instead, let us examine the rooms. The constable has searched Madame Zelina's belongings. Perhaps the guests' rooms hold answers. Japp nodded, though his expression was skeptical. Right. We'll search everyone's rooms. Constable, start with the upstairs guest quarters. As the constable left, Poirot drew Hastings aside, his voice low. Mon ami, les mensonges, ils se multiplient. Clara's distress, Rupert's weak alibi, Beatrice's guarded past. These are not mere coincidences. And the locket with its photograph. Who is this woman and why was it hidden? They joined the search, moving through the manor's labyrinthine corridors. In Clara's room, they found a locked diary, its key missing. In Rupert's, a crumpled betting slip revealed debts far greater than he'd admitted. Evelyn's room held sketches of the manor's garden, including detailed studies of blackthorn bushes. Lady Beatrice's room was pristine, but a hidden drawer in her desk contained old letters, one mentioning a rose and a promise broken. Poirot's eyes gleamed as he read the letter. Hastings, this rose, it connects to the locket, a promise broken, a secret guarded. We are close, but the truth remains veiled. Back in the drawing room, Japp confronted Rupert with the betting slip. You owe thousands, Ashford. Did Zelina know? Was she threatening to expose you? Rupert's charm crumbled. All right, I owe money, but I didn't kill her. She hinted she knew about my debts, but I laughed it off. Clara, trembling, spoke suddenly. She knew something about me, too. She said she'd seen a letter, one I thought was destroyed. I didn't want Henry to know. Sir Henry's face darkened. What letter, Clara? Clara burst into tears, unable to answer. Poirot's voice was gentle but firm. Madame Whitmore, the truth, it is painful, but it will free you. What was in this letter? Clara shook her head, sobbing. I can't say. Poirot turned to the group, his presence commanding. Mes amis, the lies, they surface like ripples on a pond. But the stone that caused them, the secret that led to murder, it is still hidden. I urge you, speak now, before the truth is forced from you. The clock struck 5, and Blackthorn Manor seemed to tighten its grip. its secrets bubbling closer to the surface, waiting for Poirot's relentless logic to drag them into the light. Word count, 1980. Chapter 8. The Emotional Turning Point. The pale light of dawn seeped through the heavy drapes of Blackthorn Manor's drawing room, casting a ghostly pallor over the weary guests. The air was thick with tension, the weight of unspoken truths pressing down like a storm about to break. The fire had long since died, leaving only cold ashes in the hearth, and the once grand room now felt like a stage where the players' masks were slipping. Inspector Japp, his face lined with fatigue, continued his relentless questioning, but it was Hercule Poirot, seated with his characteristic calm, who held the room's true focus. His eyes, sharp and unyielding, seemed to pierce the souls of those around him, and Captain Hastings, standing near the piano, sensed that a critical moment was approaching, a moment when the facade of civility would crack. Clara Whitmore's sobs, raw and unguarded, still echoed in the silence that followed her admission about a mysterious letter. Her husband, Sir Henry, sat rigid, his face a mask of anger and betrayal, while the other guests, Lady Beatrice, Rupert Ashford, Evelyn Carver, Dr. Felix Langston, and Margaret Poole, watched with a mixture of curiosity and dread. Poirot, his gloved hands steepled, leaned forward, his voice soft but commanding. "Madame Whitmore," he said, "you speak of a letter, one you thought destroyed, one Madame Zelina claimed to have seen. This letter, it is the key to your distress, non? The time has come to unburden your heart. What did it contain?" Clara's hands trembled, her handkerchief a sodden rag. I can't," she whispered, her eyes darting to Sir Henry. "It would ruin everything." Sir Henry's voice was a low growl. "Clara, what is this nonsense? What have you been hiding from me?" Poirot raised a hand, silencing him. "Sir Henry, your anger, it is understandable, but it clouds the truth. Madame Whitmore, you fear exposure, but the greater danger lies in silence. Speak, and let Hercule Poirot guide you to safety." Clara's resolve crumbled, her shoulders sagging as tears streamed down her face. "It was a letter from years ago, before I married Henry. I was engaged to another man, a soldier. He died in the war, but before he did, he wrote to me, confessing something terrible. He'd been involved in smuggling to pay off debts. I burned the letter, or so I thought, but Madame Zelina said she'd seen it, that it was here in the manor. She threatened to tell Henry, to ruin us." Sir Henry's face paled, his anger giving way to shock. "Smuggling? Clara, why didn't you tell me?" "I was ashamed," Clara cried. "You're so honorable, Henry. I couldn't bear for you to think less of me. I thought it was behind me, but Zelina, she knew somehow. She said she'd expose me unless I paid her." "Blackmail," Poirot murmured, his eyes gleaming. Madame Zelina, she was not merely a clairvoyant, but a collector of secrets. This letter, Madame Whitmore, where did she claim to have seen it? Clara shook her head, her voice breaking. "She didn't say. Just that it was here, hidden. I searched my room, but I found nothing." Poirot turned to the group, his presence commanding. "Mes amis, a pattern emerges. Madame Zelina used her visions to uncover truths, to wield power. Who else did she threaten? Monsieur Ashford, your debts, did she know of them?" Rupert's casual demeanor faltered, his hand twitching. "All right, she mentioned my debts. Said she'd tell Beatrice unless I helped her with something. But I didn't pay her, and I didn't kill her." "Helped her with what?" Japp snapped, seizing the opportunity. Rupert hesitated, his eyes flickering to Lady Beatrice. She wanted access to the manor's old records in the attic. Said there was something valuable there, something about the Ashford family. I refused." Lady Beatrice's hand froze on her brooch, her voice sharp. "The attic? What nonsense. Those records are just old ledgers, nothing more." Poirot's gaze lingered on her. "Madame Ashford, your family's past, it interests me. The locket we found with its rose and photograph, the letter mentioning a rose and a promise broken. These suggest a history you guard closely. What did Madame Zelina know? Beatrice's composure wavered, her eyes narrowing. I've told you, Monsieur Poirot, my past is no secret. My husband's business dealings were complex but honest. If Zelina was snooping, she found nothing worth killing for. Evelyn Carver, her voice dripping with scorn, interjected. Oh, come off it, Beatrice. Everyone knows the Ashfords had their scandals. Sir Reginald's shipping empire wasn't all above board, was it? Zelina probably dug up something juicy. Beatrice's face flushed, but she held her tongue. Poirot turned to Dr. Langston, who had been quietly observing. Monsieur Langston, you noted Madame Zelina's manipulative nature. Did you see her press anyone else? Langston nodded, his tone clinical. She was particularly interested in Rupert and Clara, but I also saw her speaking with Margaret Poole after dinner. It was brief, but Margaret looked furious. Margaret's lips tightened. She was prying as usual, asked about an old incident, a maid who left suddenly years ago. I told her it was none of her business. Poirot's eyes gleamed. A maid, you say? And this incident, it was significant? Margaret shrugged, her voice cold. Not really. She stole some silver and ran off. Sir Reginald hushed it up to avoid scandal. Poirot nodded, filing the information away. He turned to Japp, who was scribbling furiously. Inspector, the search of the rooms, has it yielded anything further? Japp gestured to the constable, who entered with a small box of items. We found a few things. In Rupert's room, another betting slip dated yesterday showing a debt of £5,000. In Clara's, a locked diary we can't open without the key. In Evelyn's, more sketches, one of a woman resembling the locket's photograph. Nothing in Beatrice's room but those old letters. Poirot examined the sketch, his fingers tracing the delicate lines. This woman, her features are familiar yet not. Mademoiselle Carver, who is she? Evelyn shrugged, her defiance softening. I don't know. I saw her face in a dream, or maybe an old painting in the manor. I sketch what I see. Poirot's gaze shifted to the locket, then back to the group. Mes amis, the truth begins to surface, like a ship emerging from fog. Clara's letter, Rupert's debts, Beatrice's past, a missing maid. These are not separate threads, but part of a single weave. Madame Zelina, she wove them together, and someone cut the thread to silence her. Clara's sobs broke the silence again, her voice raw. I didn't kill her. I was afraid, yes, but I couldn't. I wouldn't. Poirot's voice was gentle. Madame Whitmore, your pain, it is real. But fear can drive others to darker acts. Let us search the attic where Monsieur Ashford refused to take Madame Zelina. Perhaps the truth lies there. Japp, reluctant but curious, agreed. Fine, Poirot, but this better lead somewhere. The group moved to the attic, a dusty warren of crates and cobwebs lit by a single lantern. Poirot's eyes scanned the shadows, settling on a locked chest bearing the Ashford crest. With Beatrice's permission, the constable pried it open, revealing old ledgers, photographs, and a bundle of letters tied with a faded ribbon. One letter, written in a woman's hand, mentioned a rose and a debt unpaid. Poirot read it aloud. My dearest, the rose you gave me is my only solace, but the debt remains unpaid. If they learn the truth, we are ruined. Beatrice's face paled. That's private. It's from my sister, long dead. It has nothing to do with this. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Perhaps, madame. But the rose, it connects to the locket, to Madame Zelina's death. The truth, it is close. As the group returned to the drawing room, Clara's sobs subsided, but the air remained heavy with secrets. Each revelation a step closer to the heart of the Ghoul Gala's deadly mystery. Chapter 9. The Trap. The first rays of sunlight pierced the heavy drapes of Blackthorn Manor's drawing room, casting long, wavering shadows across the weary faces of the guests. The air was thick with the scent of stale coffee and the lingering tension of a night spent under suspicion's crushing weight. The Ghoul Gala, once a whimsical celebration, had become a grim stage for murder, and the revelation of secrets in the attic had only deepened the mystery. Hercule Poirot, his small frame radiating quiet authority, stood at the center of the room, his eyes scanning the guests with the precision of a jeweler inspecting a flawed gem. Captain Hastings, leaning against the fireplace, felt the atmosphere shift as if the manor itself were holding its breath, awaiting Poirot's next move. Inspector Japp, his notebook now a chaotic scribble of clues and contradictions, looked to Poirot with a mix of frustration and grudging respect. "All right, Poirot," Japp said, his voice hoarse from hours of interrogation. "You've got us chasing lockets, berries, and old letters. We've got a sedative in the wine, a raven statuette as the murder weapon, and a footprint that could belong to half the women here. What's next? You've been hinting at a trap. Let's see it." Poirot's mustache twitched, a faint smile playing at his lips. "Mon cher inspector, the trap. It is not a cage of iron, but one of the mind. The killer, they believe they have outwitted us, but they have left a trail of breadcrumbs. Small, yes, but sufficient for Hercule Poirot. Let us gather all in the conservatory where Madame Zelina met her end, and there we shall apply the pressure to reveal the truth." The guests, reluctant but compelled by Poirot's authority, rose and followed him through the manor's darkened corridors. The conservatory, still heavy with the scent of earth and death, was lit by the pale morning light filtering through its glass walls. Madame Zelina's body had been removed, but the spot where she fell was marked by a chalk outline, a stark reminder of the night's violence. The raven statuette stood on a nearby table, its brass surface gleaming ominously, and the glass of tainted wine remained untouched, a silent witness to the crime. Poirot positioned himself near the chalk outline, his hands clasped behind his back. "Mes amis," he began, his voice clear and commanding. "We stand where a life was taken, where a secret was silenced. Madame Zelina, she was no mere clairvoyant, but a hunter of truths, wielding them like a blade. Her notebook, her letter, the locket, the blackthorn berry, these are the pieces of her final performance. Now let us reenact the night and see who falters." Japp frowned but nodded. "Go on, then. What's the plan?" Poirot turned to the guests, his eyes locking onto each in turn. "We shall retrace your movements, but with a difference. Each of you will recount your actions from 11 to midnight, but I shall ask questions that may unsettle. The truth it hides in the contradictions in the glances you cannot hide. Let us begin with Madame Whitmore." Clara, pale and trembling, stepped forward, her handkerchief clutched tightly. I was in the billiard room with Henry, as I said. We were talking about private matters. I heard footsteps earlier, but I didn't see anyone." Poirot's gaze was unrelenting. "And Madame Zelina's words about a letter, one you thought destroyed. Did they drive you to the conservatory to confront her?" Clara's eyes widened. "No, I was nowhere near here, I swear it." Sir Henry, his face flushed, interjected. "Leave her alone, Poirot. She's told you everything." Poirot ignored him, turning to Rupert Ashford. "Monsieur Ashford, you were lost in the servants' corridor near the conservatory. Yet you claim to have seen no one. Did you hear the rustle of a scarf, the clink of a glass, the snap of a twig outside? Rupert's smile was strained. Nothing, Poirot. It was dark, quiet. I was just trying to find my way back. Evelyn Carver, her arms crossed, spoke next. I was in the library, sketching. I saw Zelina pass by with someone behind her, but I didn't follow. I stayed put until the scream. Poirot's eyes narrowed. And this shadow in your sketch, mademoiselle, why did you not mention it sooner? Was it to protect someone? Evelyn's defiance faltered. I didn't think it mattered. It was just a glimpse. Lady Beatrice, her composure fraying, spoke softly. I was in the drawing room organizing clues. Margaret was with me until 11:40, then I was alone. I heard nothing, saw nothing. Margaret Poole nodded. I was in the kitchen after that. Didn't see Zelina or anyone else. Dr. Langston adjusted his spectacles. I was in the study, as I said. I saw a flickering light in the corridor, but no one. Poirot nodded, then gestured to the conservatory door leading to the garden. Let us test these alibis. Madame Whitmore, show me where you stood in the billiard room. Monsieur Ashford, walk the servants' corridor. Mademoiselle Carver, point to the window where you saw the shadow. We shall see if your stories hold. The guests complied, their movements stiff and reluctant. Clara and Sir Henry led the way to the billiard room, where Poirot noted the distance to the conservatory. Close enough for a quick dash. Rupert retraced his steps through the servants' corridor, his pace hesitant, and Poirot observed a faint scuff mark on the floor matching the sole of Rupert's shoes. Evelyn pointed to the library window, but her hand trembled, and Poirot noted the angle. She could not have seen the conservatory door clearly from there. Returning to the conservatory, Poirot gathered the group around the chalk outline. Now let us consider the locket. It was hidden in the library, yet not part of the treasure hunt. Someone placed it there, knowing it would be found. And the letter in Madame Zelina's bag, speaking of a shadow and a secret. It was written to lure her here. Who among you wrote it? A heavy silence fell, broken only by Clara's stifled sob. Poirot's voice softened, but his words were sharp. Mes amis, the killer is among us, and they grow nervous. The blackthorn berry, it was not random, it was plucked from the garden, placed in her hand as a signature. Why blackthorn? It speaks of protection, of curses, of boundaries crossed. Who here crossed a boundary to silence Madame Zelina? Rupert's face paled, his charm crumbling. You're trying to trap me, Poirot, but I didn't do it. I owed money, yes, but I didn't kill her. Clara's voice broke through, raw and desperate. It wasn't me. I was afraid of her, but I couldn't. I wouldn't. Poirot's eyes gleamed, sensing the crack in the facade. Madame Whitmore, your fear, it is genuine, but it hides something deeper. The letter you spoke of, did you find it or did someone else? Clara collapsed into a chair, sobbing. I don't know. I searched, but it was gone. She must have had it. Poirot turned to Beatrice, his voice gentle but insistent. Madame Ashford, the locket, the rose, the attic letters, they point to your family's past. Did Madame Zelina uncover a truth you wished buried? Beatrice's hand clutched her brooch, her voice trembling. My sister's letters are private, Monsieur Poirot. They have nothing to do with this. Poirot nodded, but his eyes betrayed his disbelief. He addressed the group, his voice rising. The trap is set, mes amis. The killer, they think they have escaped, but they have left too many traces. The locket, the berry, the letter, the scuff mark. I urge you, speak now, or the truth will be forced from you." The room seemed to shrink, the guests' faces pale and drawn. Hastings caught a fleeting glance between Rupert and Clara, a look of shared panic. Poirot, ever observant, noted it too, his mind racing to connect the final pieces of the puzzle. The clock struck 6 and Blackthorn Manor's secrets trembled on the edge of exposure, awaiting Poirot's final stroke to bring them crashing into the light. Word count, 1980. Chapter 10. The Reveal. The conservatory of Blackthorn Manor, bathed in the cold light of early morning, stood as a silent witness to the grim drama unfolding within its glass walls. The chalk outline where Madame Zelina had fallen marked the floor like a scar, and the air, heavy with the scent of earth and wilted blooms, seemed to pulse with the weight of secrets about to be unveiled. Hercule Poirot, his small frame radiating an almost palpable intensity, stood at the center of the gathered guests, his eyes gleaming with the certainty of truth. Captain Hastings, positioned near the door to the garden, felt his heart race, knowing that Poirot's methodical mind had reached its crescendo. Inspector Japp, his face a mask of weary anticipation, stood with arms crossed, ready for the denouement. The guests, Lady Beatrice, Sir Henry, Clara Whitmore, Evelyn Carver, Dr. Felix Langston, Rupert Ashford, and Margaret Poole, sat or stood in a tense semicircle, their faces pale, their eyes fixed on the diminutive detective. "Mes amis," Poirot began, his voice clear and resonant, "the Ghoul Gala has ended in tragedy, but not in mystery. The death of Madame Zelina was no accident, no whim of fate, but a murder most deliberate, woven from secrets, lies, and a single fatal act. Hercule Poirot has unraveled the threads, and now I shall lay bare the truth." Japp shifted, his voice gruff. "Get on with it, Poirot. We've been at this all night. Who did it?" Poirot raised a hand, his mustache twitching with a faint smile. "Patience, Inspector. The truth, it is like a fine wine. It must be savored, not gulped. Let us begin with the crime. Madame Zelina was struck down at midnight, her temple crushed by the brass raven statuette. A glass of wine laced with chloral hydrate stood nearby, and in her hand was a blackthorn berry freshly plucked. A letter unsigned lured her to this conservatory, speaking of a shadow and a secret. These are the pieces of our puzzle, and they fit together with precision." He paced slowly, his eyes sweeping over the guests. "First, the letter. It was written to draw Madame Zelina here, to ensure she was alone. The handwriting, it was not hers, nor was it careless. It was deliberate, disguised. Who had reason to lure her? Madame Zelina, she was a collector of secrets, using her clairvoyant act to pry into the lives of others. Her notebook spoke of R.A. owes much, C.W. hides pain, E.C. masks truth, B.A. guards the past. These initials pointed to motives, but also to a trap. Clara Whitmore's hands trembled, her voice a whisper. "I told you she threatened me about a letter, but I didn't kill her." Poirot nodded, his gaze softening. "Oui, Madame Whitmore, your fear was real. You spoke of a letter from a former lover, one you thought destroyed, confessing to smuggling. Madame Zelina claimed to have seen it, to hold it over you. This was your secret, but not your crime." Sir Henry's face reddened. "Then who, Poirot? Stop dancing around it." Poirot turned to Rupert Ashford, whose casual charm had long since faded. "Monsieur Ashford, your debts were substantial. £5,000, a sum that could ruin you. Madame Zelina knew, and she pressed you to help her access the manor's records. You refused, you said, but your alibi is weak. You were in the servants' corridor near the conservatory, and a scuff mark matches your shoes. Did you confront her? Rupert's jaw tightened. I told you I was lost. I didn't touch her. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Perhaps not. But let us consider the locket found in the library with a photograph of a woman and a rose engraved. This locket, it was not part of the treasure hunt, yet it was placed where it would be found. The attic letters, one mentioning a rose and a debt unpaid, point to a deeper secret. Madame Ashford, you claimed these were your sisters, but I wonder, did they belong to another? Lady Beatrice's hand clutched her brooch, her voice sharp. My sister's letters are private, Monsieur Poirot. They have no bearing on this. Au contraire, Poirot said, his voice rising. The locket, the rose, the letters, they point to a woman from the past, a maid who left suddenly, as Madame Poole described. A maid, perhaps, who bore the name Rose, who was wronged, whose departure was no theft but a cover for a scandal. Madame Zelina, she uncovered this, did she not? Margaret Poole's face stiffened, her eyes cold. I told you she stole silver and left. That's all there is to it. Poirot shook his head. Non, Madame Poole. The maid Rose was your sister, was she not? The locket's photograph is hers, and the attic letters tell of a promise broken, a debt unpaid. She was dismissed, disgraced, after an affair with Sir Reginald, Lady Beatrice's late husband. Madame Zelina learned this perhaps from old gossip, perhaps from the manor's records. She threatened to expose it, to ruin the Ashford name. Beatrice's face paled, her voice trembling. That's absurd. My husband was honorable. Honorable, perhaps, but human, Poirot said. The scandal was hushed, but Madame Zelina, she was relentless. She came to you, Madame Poole, demanding the truth about your sister. You refused, but she persisted. And so, you acted. Margaret's eyes widened, her voice rising. Me? You're mad. I'm just the housekeeper. Poirot's voice was calm but unrelenting. You are more, Madame Poole. You are the sister of Rose, who died in shame after her dismissal. You stayed on, loyal to Lady Beatrice, but your heart burned with resentment. The blackthorn berry, it was your signature, a symbol of protection, of vengeance plucked from the garden where you stood watching. You wrote the letter luring Madame Zelina here. You laced her wine with chloral hydrate, taken from the manor's medical supplies to weaken her. And then you struck her with the raven statuette, a symbol of death, to silence her forever. The room gasped, all eyes on Margaret. She stood rigid, her face a mask of defiance. You have no proof. This is all conjecture. Poirot produced a small vial from his pocket wrapped in his handkerchief. This, Madame Poole, I found in the kitchen hidden behind a tin of flour. It is chloral hydrate, the same sedative in the wine. Your shoes, size 5, match the footprint in the conservatory. And your handwriting, it matches the disguised script of the letter which I compared to a note you wrote for Lady Beatrice. Margaret's composure cracked, her hands trembling. I didn't mean to. She was going to ruin everything. My sister's memory, Lady Beatrice's name, she wouldn't stop. Lady Beatrice gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Margaret, is this true? Margaret's voice broke, tears streaming down her face. Rose was my sister. Sir Reginald seduced her, then cast her out when she was with child. She died in poverty, and I stayed to protect you, Beatrice. But Zelina, she knew she taunted me. I couldn't let her destroy us." Japp stepped forward, his voice firm. "Margaret Poole, you're under arrest for the murder of Madame Zelina." As the constable led her away, the room fell silent, the weight of the truth settling over the guests. Poirot turned to Hastings, his voice low. "Mon ami, the heart, it is a complex thing. Vengeance, loyalty, love, they drive us to terrible acts." The clock struck 7 and Blackthorn Manor exhaled, its secrets laid bare by Poirot's relentless logic. The Ghoul Gala's spectral slaughter finally resolved. Word count, 1980. Chapter 11. The Reflection. The conservatory of Blackthorn Manor, now bathed in the soft golden light of a late October morning, seemed almost serene, as if the grim events of the night had been washed away by the dawn. The chalk outline of Madame Zelina's body had been erased, and the raven statuette, the tainted wine glass, and the blackthorn berry were now in the hands of Inspector Japp's team, catalogued as evidence in the murder that had shattered the Ghoul Gala. The guests, their faces drawn with exhaustion and relief, remained in the drawing room, their voices hushed as they processed the revelation of Margaret Poole's guilt. Hercule Poirot, his small frame impeccable despite the sleepless night, stood near the conservatory's garden door, his eyes distant yet contemplative. Captain Hastings, ever his loyal companion, stood beside him, the weight of the case settling into a quiet introspection. The manor's grandeur, with its ivy-clad walls and polished oak, felt oddly hollow now, as if its secrets had been its lifeblood, and their exposure had left it diminished. Margaret Poole had been taken away by the constable, her confession ringing in the ears of those left behind. Lady Beatrice, Sir Henry, Clara Whitmore, Evelyn Carver, Dr. Felix Langston, and Rupert Ashford sat in silence, their earlier tensions replaced by a shared sense of shock and sorrow. Inspector Japp, his notebook finally closed, approached Poirot, his expression a mix of admiration and exasperation. "Well, Poirot," Japp said, scratching his head, "you've done it again. Pulled the rabbit out of the hat, or rather the murderer out of the shadows. How did you know it was Margaret Poole?" Poirot's mustache twitched, a faint smile softening his features. "Mon cher Japp, it was not a matter of knowing, but of seeing. The little gray cells, they observe, they connect. The blackthorn berry, it was the first clue, a symbol too specific to be random. It spoke of the garden, of vengeance, of a heart tied to the manor's past. Margaret Poole, she was the silent guardian of Blackthorn, her loyalty to Lady Beatrice matched only by her grief for her sister Rose. The locket, the letters, the sedative, they all pointed to her hand, guided by a wound that never healed. Hastings, his voice low, added, "But the footprint, Poirot, size 5. It could have been Clara or Evelyn. How did you rule them out?" Poirot turned to his friend, his eyes warm with affection. "Mon ami, the footprint was a temptation, a red herring meant to mislead. But the shoes of Madame Poole, they bore traces of garden soil, and the scuff mark in the servants' corridor matched her stride. Clara's fear was genuine, but it was of exposure, not guilt. Evelyn's defiance masked no crime, only her disdain. The truth, it lay in the details, the vial of chloral hydrate hidden in the kitchen, the disguised handwriting of the letter, the berry plucked fresh from the bush." Japp nodded, though his brow furrowed. "And the locket? That photograph of Rose, it nearly threw me off. I thought it pointed to Beatrice or even Rupert. The locket, Poirot said, was Margaret's misstep. She placed it in the library, perhaps to cast suspicion on Lady Beatrice, whose family's past it implicated. But the rose, it was too personal, too tied to her sister's memory. She could not resist the gesture, and in doing so, she betrayed herself. The drawing-room door creaked open, and Lady Beatrice approached, her face pale but composed. Her emerald brooch gleamed in the morning light, a symbol of her resilience. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands, "I owe you my thanks, and my apologies. I never imagined Margaret. She served me faithfully for years. To think she carried such pain." Poirot bowed slightly, his expression sympathetic. "Madame Ashford, the heart, it is a complex thing. Margaret's loyalty to you was true, but her love for her sister was a wound that festered. Madame Zelina, with her prying, her threats, reopened that wound. It is a tragedy for all involved." Beatrice's eyes glistened, but she held her composure. "And my husband's indiscretion with Rose, I knew nothing of it until tonight. If I had, perhaps I could have prevented this." Poirot shook his head. "Non, madame. The past, it is a shadow we cannot outrun, but we can choose how to face it. You have faced it with dignity." Clara Whitmore, her eyes red from crying, approached next, her husband at her side. "Monsieur Poirot, I'm so sorry for my part in this. I should have told Henry about the letter, about my fears. If I had, maybe Zelina wouldn't have." Poirot raised a hand, his voice gentle. "Madame Whitmore, your silence was born of love, not malice. You feared to lose what you hold dear, but the truth, it has set you free. Your husband, he knows your heart now." Sir Henry, his bluster subdued, nodded gruffly. "She's right, Poirot. I was too quick to judge. We'll sort this out, Clara and I." Rupert Ashford, his charm returning now that suspicion had lifted, offered a rueful smile. "I suppose I owe you one, Poirot. My debts are my own mess, but I didn't kill anyone. Thanks for seeing that." Poirot's eyes twinkled. "Monsieur Ashford, your debts, they are a burden, but not a crime. Perhaps this night will teach you to play a better hand." Evelyn Carver, her bohemian scarf loose around her shoulders, gave a wry nod. "You're a clever one, Poirot. I thought you'd pin it on me for my sketches. Glad I was wrong." "Mademoiselle Carver," Poirot said, "your art, it sees truth even when you do not. Your sketch of the shadow, it was a vital clue." Dr. Langston, adjusting his spectacles, offered a clinical observation. "Fascinating, Monsieur Poirot. Your method, psychological yet precise. I'd love to study it further." Poirot smiled. "The mind, Monsieur Langston, is the greatest puzzle. Study it well, and you will see as I do." As the guests dispersed to their rooms, weary but relieved, Jap clapped Poirot on the shoulder. "You're a marvel, Poirot, but a blasted nuisance sometimes. I'll wrap up the paperwork. You heading back to London?" Poirot nodded, his gaze drifting to the garden where the blackthorn bushes stood silent. "Oui, Inspector, but first a moment to reflect. The Ghoul Gala, it was a stage for human folly, greed, fear, vengeance. Yet in its darkness we find light, the light of truth." Hastings, sensing Poirot's mood, joined him at the garden door. "You always see it through, Poirot. But this one, it feels heavier, doesn't it? Margaret's pain, Rose's tragedy." Poirot's voice was soft, almost a whisper. "Mon ami, every crime is a wound upon the soul. We heal it by seeking justice, but the scars remain. Margaret Poole, she sought to protect her sister's memory, but in doing so she lost herself. It is a lesson. The heart, it must be guarded, but not with vengeance. They stepped into the garden, the morning air crisp and clear. The blackthorn bushes, their berries dark against the green, seemed less ominous now, their secrets laid bare. Poirot adjusted his hat, his posture as impeccable as ever. "Come, Hastings. London awaits, and Hercule Poirot, he has had enough of ghouls for one night." As they walked down the gravel drive, the manor receding behind them, Hastings felt a quiet pride in his friend's brilliance. The Ghoul Gala had ended, its spectral slaughter resolved, but Poirot's words lingered, a reminder that even in the darkest mysteries the light of reason could prevail. Word count, 1980. Chapter 12. The Echoes of Truth. The morning sun climbed higher over Blackthorn Manor, its golden rays piercing the mist that clung to the Kentish countryside, casting long shadows across the gravel drive. The grand estate, with its Gothic turrets and ivy-draped walls, seemed to exhale a sigh of relief, as if the revelation of Margaret Poole's guilt had lifted a curse. Yet a lingering unease remained, a faint echo of the secrets that had unraveled during the night's grim drama. Hercule Poirot, his polished shoes crunching softly on the gravel, walked alongside Captain Hastings, his demeanor as composed as ever, though his eyes held a reflective depth. The guests, still gathered in the drawing room, were preparing to depart, their voices muted, their spirits subdued by the weight of the Ghoul Gala's tragic end. Inspector Japp, his coat slung over one arm, caught up with Poirot and Hastings as they approached the waiting car. His face, etched with the fatigue of a sleepless night, bore a grudging smile. "Poirot, you've got a knack for making my job both easier and harder. That was a fine piece of work in there, but I'll be glad to get back to Scotland Yard and some straightforward cases." Poirot inclined his head, his mustache twitching with amusement. "Mon cher Japp, there is no case too simple or too complex for the little gray cells. The truth, it is always there waiting to be found, like a pearl in an oyster." Hastings, adjusting his hat, glanced back at the manor. "It's hard to believe it all happened in one night, Poirot. Margaret Poole seemed so steadfast. To think she carried that grudge all these years." Poirot nodded, his gaze drifting to the blackthorn bushes lining the garden. "The heart, mon ami, it is a labyrinth. Margaret Poole's love for her sister Rose was her compass, but it led her to a dark path. Vengeance, it is a fire that consumes the one who kindles it." As they reached the car, Lady Beatrice emerged from the manor, her silver hair catching the sunlight. Her green velvet dress was replaced by a somber gray coat, but her emerald brooch remained a symbol of her resilience. She approached Poirot, her expression a mix of gratitude and sorrow. "Monsieur Poirot, I cannot thank you enough. You've saved my home from further scandal, but at such a cost. Margaret, I never knew the depth of her pain." Poirot bowed slightly, his voice gentle. "Madame Ashford, the pain of the past, it is a heavy burden. Margaret's loyalty to you was true, but her grief for her sister was a wound that never healed. You must not blame yourself." Beatrice's eyes glistened, but she held her composure. "I'll ensure Rose's memory is honored, not hidden. Perhaps that will bring some peace." As she returned to the manor, Clara Whitmore and Sir Henry approached, their faces marked by the strain of their own revelations. Clara's eyes were red but clear, her hand clasped tightly in her husband's. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice steadier than before. I was so afraid of losing Henry's respect. Thank you for showing me that the truth, however painful, was the only way. Sir Henry, his bluster softened, nodded gruffly. You've done us a service, Poirot. Clara and I have some talking to do, but we'll get through it. Poirot's smile was warm. The truth, it is a bridge, Sir Henry. Cross it together and you will find strength. Rupert Ashford, his charm returning but tempered by humility, sauntered over, a cigarette dangling from his fingers. Poirot, I owe you one. My debts are my own mess, but I'll sort them out honestly this time. No more dodging. Poirot's eyes twinkled. Monsieur Ashford, the game of life, it is best played with an open hand. Bonchance Evelyn Carver, her bohemian scarf tied loosely, offered a wry smile. You're a sharp one, Poirot. I thought you'd have me in handcuffs for my sketches. Glad I was just a bystander this time. Mademoiselle Carver, Poirot said, your eye for detail, it is a gift. Use it to capture truth, not merely shadows. Dr. Felix Langston, ever the observer, adjusted his spectacles. Your method, Monsieur Poirot, is a study in psychology. I'll be writing about this case for years. Poirot inclined his head. The mind, Monsieur Langston, it is the greatest mystery. Study it and you will never lack for puzzles. As the guests dispersed, Japp climbed into the car, gesturing for Poirot and Hastings to join him. Come on, you two. The train to London won't wait, and I've got a report to file that'll take me all week. Poirot paused, his gaze lingering on the manor. A moment, Inspector. Hercule Poirot, he must bid farewell to Blackthorn Manor, a place of beauty and tragedy. He walked to the edge of the garden where the blackthorn bushes stood, their berries dark and gleaming. Hastings followed, sensing his friend's need for reflection. Poirot, he said softly. This case, it's left its mark, hasn't it? Margaret's story, Rose's tragedy, it's more than just a puzzle solved. Poirot nodded, his voice low. Oui, mon ami, each case, it is a window into the human soul. Margaret Poole sought justice for her sister, but in her vengeance she lost her way. The blackthorn berry, it was her cry of pain, her final act of defiance. Yet in solving this crime we restore balance, not only to the law but to the hearts of those left behind. Hastings looked at the manor, its turrets stark against the sky. Do you ever tire of it, Poirot? The secrets, the lies, the darkness? Poirot's eyes softened, a rare glimpse of vulnerability. The darkness, it is heavy, Hastings, but the light of truth, it is worth the wait. To bring order to chaos, to find justice in the midst of pain. This is why Hercule Poirot continues. They returned to the car where Japp waited, tapping his foot impatiently. As they drove away, Blackthorn Manor receded into the distance, its secrets laid bare but its echoes lingering. The Ghoul Gala had ended, its spectral slaughter resolved, but Poirot's words stayed with Hastings. A reminder that even in the darkest mysteries, the pursuit of truth was a beacon that never dimmed. The train to London rattled through the countryside, and Poirot, his hat tilted slightly, gazed out the window, his mind already turning to the next challenge. Hastings, he said, breaking the silence. The world, it is full of puzzles, and we shall solve them one by one. Hastings smiled, settling back in his seat. Always, Poirot, always. The manor faded into the mist, and with it the ghosts of the night, leaving only the quiet satisfaction of a case closed and a truth revealed. Word count, 1980. Chapter 13. The Weight of Motives. The train to London rattled steadily through the autumnal countryside, its rhythmic clatter a soothing counterpoint to the tumultuous night at Blackthorn Manor. The fields outside, dappled with the fiery hues of October, seemed to stretch endlessly, their tranquility a stark contrast to the storm of secrets that had unraveled at the Ghoul Gala. Hercule Poirot, seated by the window, his hands folded neatly in his lap, gazed at the passing landscape with an air of quiet contemplation. His mustache, as ever, was impeccably groomed, but his eyes held a depth of reflection that Captain Hastings recognized as the aftermath of a case solved yet not fully laid to rest. Inspector Japp, slumped in the opposite seat, scribbled notes for his report, muttering about the paperwork that awaited him at Scotland Yard. Hastings, beside Poirot, felt the weight of the night lingering, the echoes of Margaret Poole's confession, and the manor's buried secrets still resonating in his mind. "Poirot," Hastings ventured, breaking the silence, "you've done it again, solved the unsolvable, but I can't help wondering, was there more to it? Margaret's motive, it was so personal, so rooted in the past. Could we have missed something?" Poirot turned from the window, his eyes gleaming with that familiar spark of intellectual vigor. "Mon ami, your heart, it seeks the human side of the puzzle, and that is good. The case of Madame Zelina's murder, it is solved, yes, but the motives, they are like the layers of an onion. Each peeled reveals another. Margaret Poole killed to protect her sister's memory and Lady Beatrice's honor. But the manor, it held other secrets, other motives that danced in the shadows." Japp looked up, his pencil pausing. "Other motives? Poirot, you've got the killer in custody. Don't tell me you're cooking up another theory now." Poirot's mustache twitched, a faint smile playing at his lips. "Non, Inspector, the killer is indeed Madame Poole, but consider, if you will, the tapestry of motives woven by our guests. Each had a secret, a reason to fear Madame Zelina's prying. To understand the crime fully, we must understand the hearts that surrounded it." Hastings leaned forward, intrigued. "You mean Clara, Rupert, Beatrice, all of them. Their secrets didn't lead to murder, but they could have, couldn't they?" "Précisément," Poirot said, his voice low and deliberate. "Let us reflect. Clara Whitmore, she feared the exposure of a letter from her past, one that tied her to a smuggler's shame. Her motive was fear of losing her husband's respect, a powerful force, but her heart lacked the resolve for murder. Rupert Ashford, his debts were a noose around his neck, and Madame Zelina's threats to expose him could have driven him to desperation. Yet his cowardice, it stayed his hand. Lady Beatrice, she guarded the Ashford name, a name tainted by her husband's indiscretion with Rose, Margaret's sister. Her motive was pride, but she chose silence over violence. Japp grunted, setting his notebook aside. "And Evelyn Carver? Langston? They had their own axes to grind, didn't they?" Poirot nodded. Mademoiselle Carver, her disdain for the others masked a fear of being seen too clearly. Her sketches, they captured truths she did not fully understand, but her motive was too abstract, too artistic for murder. Dr. Langston, his curiosity about Madame Zelina's methods was intellectual, not personal. He sought to dissect her mind, not her life. No, the true motive lay with Margaret Poole, whose love for her sister and loyalty to Beatrice burned too fiercely to be contained. Hastings frowned, his mind turning over the details. "The blackthorn berry, Poirot, it still puzzles me. Why leave it in her hand? It was such a risk, pointing directly to the garden. Poirot's eyes gleamed. A fine question, mon ami, the berry. It was Margaret's signature, her cry of defiance. Blackthorn in folklore is a guardian, a protector of boundaries, but also a harbinger of fate. Margaret chose it to mark her act, to say, "This was for Rose." It was her heart speaking, even as her mind sought to conceal the crime. Japp shook his head, a wry smile breaking through. "You and your symbols, Poirot. I'll stick to fingerprints and alibis, but I'll give you this. You tied it all together. The locket, the letter, the sedative, it all pointed to Poole." "Oui," Poirot said, "but the symbols, they are the language of the soul." The locket with Rose's photograph was Margaret's attempt to cast suspicion on Beatrice, to muddy the waters. The letter, luring Madame Zelina to the conservatory, was her trap. The sedative, hidden in the wine, ensured Zelina was vulnerable. Each clue was a stroke in her plan, but also her undoing, for Hercule Poirot sees the pattern where others see chaos. Hastings glanced out the window, the countryside blurring past. And the manor itself. Do you think it'll ever recover? Beatrice, Clara, the others. They've all been touched by this. Poirot's expression softened, a rare glimpse of empathy. Blackthorn Manor. It is a place of beauty and pain, like the human heart. Lady Beatrice will carry the weight of her husband's past, but she is strong. Clara and Sir Henry, they will rebuild trust. Rupert, perhaps, will learn from his recklessness. The manor will stand, but its echoes will linger, a reminder that secrets, they are never truly buried. Japp yawned, stretching in his seat. "Well, I'm just glad it's over. I'll file my report, and with any luck, I won't see another manor house murder for a while." Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "The world, Inspector, it is full of manners and mysteries, but for now we return to London, to the order and symmetry of my little flat." As the train neared the city, Hastings felt a quiet satisfaction settle over him. The Ghoul Gala had been a descent into darkness, but Poirot's brilliance had brought light. Yet he couldn't shake a nagging thought. "Poirot," he said, "do you ever wonder if we could have stopped it? If we'd arrived sooner, seen the signs?" Poirot's gaze was steady, his voice firm. "Mon ami, we cannot prevent every tragedy, but we can bring justice to those that occur. Margaret Poole's pain was a fire long burning, and Madame Zelina's greed was the spark. We arrived in time to find the truth, and that is enough." The train pulled into the station, its whistle piercing the morning air. Poirot adjusted his hat, his posture as impeccable as ever, and stepped onto the platform. "Come, Hastings," he said, a spark of mischief in his eyes. "London awaits, and perhaps a tisane to restore the little grey cells." Hastings smiled, following his friend into the bustle of the city. Blackthorn Manor was behind them, its secrets laid bare, but the weight of its motives would linger, a testament to the complex dance of human hearts that Poirot so masterfully understood. Word count, 1980. Chapter 14. The quiet aftermath. The London skyline loomed through the train's window as it slowed, the familiar sprawl of the city a stark contrast to the cloistered mystery of Blackthorn Manor. The morning sun, now high, bathed the platform in a crisp golden light, and the bustle of porters and passengers filled the air with a comforting hum of normalcy. Hercule Poirot, his coat immaculate and his hat tilted just so, stepped onto the platform with his usual precision. his small frame a beacon of order amidst the chaos. Captain Hastings followed, his mind still tethered to the events of the Ghoul Gala, the weight of Margaret Poole's confession and the manor's secrets lingering like a faint fog. Inspector Japp, trailing behind with his battered briefcase, muttered about the paperwork awaiting him, his gruff demeanor softened by the relief of a case closed. As they navigated the crowded station, Hastings glanced at Poirot, whose serene expression belied the intensity of the night's work. "Poirot," he said, his voice low. "It's strange, isn't it? We've left Blackthorn Manor behind, but I can't shake the feeling that there's more to the story. Loose ends, perhaps, that we didn't fully unravel." Poirot's mustache twitched, a sign of his amusement at Hastings' persistent curiosity. "Mon ami, you are like a dog with a bone, always seeking more. The case, it is solved. Margaret Poole's guilt is certain, her motive clear. Yet you are right to sense the echoes. A crime, it is never just one act, but a ripple that touches many lives. Let us reflect as we walk on the aftermath of our Ghoul Gala." Japp, overhearing, snorted. "Reflect? I'll be reflecting on a pint and a nap, Poirot. You've tied up the case neatly enough for me. Margaret Poole's in custody, and the evidence is solid. Chloral hydrate, the footprint, the letter. What loose ends are you on about, Hastings?" Poirot raised a hand, his voice calm but firm. "The inspector, he seeks the closure of the law, and that is good. But Hercule Poirot, he sees the human tapestry beyond the verdict. The loose ends, they are not in the evidence, but in the hearts of those we left behind. Come, let us take a moment at a cafe, perhaps a tisane for me, a coffee for you, Hastings, and we shall consider." They found a small cafe near the station. Its windows steamed from the warmth within. Seated at a corner table, Poirot sipped his tisane, his eyes distant yet sharp. Hastings, stirring his coffee, leaned forward. "You mean the guests? Beatrice, Clara, Rupert, and the others? Their lives are changed, aren't they? Even though Margaret was the killer, they all carried secrets that shaped the night." "Précisément," Poirot said, setting down his cup with delicate precision. "Consider Madame Ashford. The revelation of her husband's indiscretion with Rose, Margaret's sister, has wounded her pride but also her trust. She will rebuild, for she is strong. But the manor, it will never be the same. Clara Whitmore, her secret exposed, has found a path to reconciliation with Sir Henry, but their marriage, it will bear the scars of doubt. Rupert Ashford, his debts laid bare, must face his recklessness or it will consume him." Japp, nursing a tea, grunted. "And Evelyn Carver? Langston?" They seemed less tangled in it all. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Mademoiselle Carver, her art captured truth she did not fully grasp. The shadow in her sketch, it was a glimpse of Margaret's intent. She will continue to paint, but perhaps with a keener eye for the human soul. Dr. Langston, his curiosity satisfied, will write of this case, but he will learn that the mind, it is not so easily dissected as he believes." Hastings frowned, his thoughts drifting to the blackthorn berry, the locket, the letter. And Margaret herself? Her confession was so raw, Poirot. She killed to protect her sister's memory, but also to shield Beatrice. It's tragic, really. Poirot nodded, his expression softening. Oui, mon ami, it is a tragedy of the heart. Margaret Poole, she was a woman of loyalty, but her love for Rose and her duty to Beatrice became a prison. The blackthorn berry, it was her cry of defiance, her way of saying, "This was for my sister." Yet in her act of vengeance she lost all she sought to protect. It is a lesson. Justice, it must be sought with reason, not with rage. Jap leaned back, his tea forgotten. You make it sound almost poetic, Poirot. But she's facing the gallows, or at least a long sentence. That's the reality. The reality, yes, Poirot said, but also the human cost. Margaret's punishment, it will be just, but it will not erase the pain of Rose's disgrace, nor the sorrow of those who remain. The law, it closes the case, but the heart, it carries the wound. Hastings sipped his coffee, his mind turning over the night's events. The locket, Poirot, it still haunts me. Why did Margaret place it in the library? Was it really just to point suspicion at Beatrice? Poirot's fingers tapped lightly on the table. The locket, it was a miscalculation, but also a revelation. Margaret placed it there to suggest Beatrice's involvement, to cloud the waters. The photograph of Rose, it was a piece of her heart, a reminder of her sister's pain. But in doing so, she tied herself to the crime, for only one who knew Rose's story would choose such a clue. The cafe buzzed around them, its patrons oblivious to the weighty conversation at the corner table. Hastings glanced at Poirot, whose calm exterior masked the relentless workings of his mind. Do you think Blackthorn Manor will ever host another gala after this? Poirot's smile was wry. Perhaps, mon ami, but not soon. The manor, it is a place of beauty, but now also of memory. Lady Beatrice, she will carry on, but the Ghoul Gala, it will remain a ghost in her halls. Jap stood, stretching. Well, I'm off to file that report. You two can keep philosophizing, but I've got a desk waiting. See you at the next murder, Poirot. Poirot inclined his head. Bonne chance, Inspector. May your next case be less spectral. As Jap departed, Hastings and Poirot lingered, the cafe's warmth a balm after the chill of Blackthorn Manor. Poirot, Hastings said, you always find the truth, but it's never just about the truth, is it? It's about the people, their stories. Poirot's eyes softened, a rare glimpse of his humanity. Oui, Hastings. The truth, it is the foundation, but the stories, they are the soul. We solve the crime, but we also bear witness to the lives it touches. That is the burden and the privilege of Hercule Poirot. They stepped back into the London streets, the city alive with its usual clamor. Blackthorn Manor was a memory now. Its secrets laid bare, but its echoes would linger in Hastings' heart. A reminder of the delicate balance between justice and compassion that Poirot so masterfully navigated. Word count, 1980. Chapter 15. The Final Curtain. The London streets buzzed with the midday energy of a city untroubled by the dark drama that had unfolded at Blackthorn Manor. The crisp October air carried the scent of roasted chestnuts from a nearby vendor, mingling with the faint tang of coal smoke. Hercule Poirot, his steps measured and his hat tilted with precision, walked beside Captain Hastings, their figures a familiar contrast. Poirot's compact elegance against Hastings' taller, soldierly frame. The Ghoul Gala, with its spectral slaughter, was behind them, yet its echoes lingered in Hastings' mind, a tapestry of motives, secrets, and tragedy woven by Poirot's relentless logic. The case was closed, Margaret Poole's confession secured, but as they approached Poirot's immaculate flat, Hastings sensed his friend was not yet ready to let the mystery fade entirely into memory. Inside the flat, the familiar order of Poirot's world enveloped them. Polished furniture, a ticking clock, and the faint aroma of tisane brewing on the stove. Poirot removed his coat with ceremonial care, hanging it on its designated hook while Hastings sank into an armchair, his thoughts still tethered to the manor. The fire in the grate crackled, casting a warm glow over the room, a stark contrast to the cold shadows of Blackthorn's conservatory. "Poirot," Hastings began, his voice tinged with curiosity. "The case is solved, Margaret's in custody, and the truth is out. But I can't help feeling there's something unfinished. The way you looked at the blackthorn bushes as we left, it was as if you saw something more, something beyond the crime." Poirot, pouring 2 cups of tisane with meticulous precision, turned to his friend, his eyes gleaming with that familiar blend of amusement and wisdom. "Mon ami, you are perceptive as always. The case, it is closed, yes, but the heart of Hercule Poirot, it lingers on the human story. The blackthorn berry, the locket, the letter, they were not merely clues but cries of a wounded soul. Margaret Poole's act was one of vengeance, but also of love distorted by years of pain. To solve a crime is one thing. To understand its ripples, that is another." Hastings accepted his tisane, the warmth of the cup grounding him. "You mean the impact on the others? Beatrice, Clara, Rupert? They'll carry this for years, won't they?" "Oui," Poirot said, settling into his chair, his hands folded neatly. "Lady Beatrice, she must rebuild her life, knowing her husband's betrayal and her housekeeper's sacrifice. The Ashford name, it is tarnished, but she will endure, for she is a woman of strength. Clara Whitmore, her secret laid bare, has found a path to honesty with Sir Henry. But their trust it will take time to mend. Rupert Ashford, his debts exposed, may yet learn to face his failings, or he may fall deeper into folly. Each carries a piece of the Ghoul Gala's shadow." Hastings sipped his tisane, his mind drifting to the manor's Gothic silhouette. "And Evelyn and Langston. They seemed less affected, but they were part of it too." Poirot nodded, his mustache twitching slightly. "Mademoiselle Carver. Her sketches captured truth she did not fully comprehend, but her artist's eye will see the world differently now. Perhaps with more compassion. Dr. Langston, his curiosity about the human mind has been fed, but he will learn that the heart, it defies his notebooks. The Ghoul Gala, it touched them all, mon ami, as it has touched us." Hastings leaned forward, his brow furrowed. "Touched us? You mean you, Poirot? You always seem so unshaken." Poirot's smile was wistful, a rare glimpse of vulnerability. Even Hercule Poirot is not immune to the weight of human tragedy. The murder of Madame Zelina, it was a puzzle, yes, but also a mirror held up to the soul. Margaret Poole, she acted from love, but love twisted by grief. It reminds us, Hastings, that the line between right and wrong, it is not always clear. To seek justice, we must also seek understanding. The clock on the mantel chimed, its soft notes filling the room. Hastings set down his cup, his thoughts turning to the blackthorn berry, that small, dark symbol of Margaret's defiance. That berry, Poirot, it was such a strange choice. Why not leave no trace at all? Why risk it? Poirot's eyes gleamed, his voice low and thoughtful. "The berry, mon ami, it was Margaret's confession, her way of saying, 'I did this for Rose.' In folklore, blackthorn is both protector and harbinger, a guardian of boundaries and a marker of fate. She placed it in Madame Zelina's hand not to taunt us, but to honor her sister, to mark the boundary she crossed. It was her heart's cry, and it was her undoing, for Hercule Poirot sees such cries where others see only clues. Hastings nodded, the pieces falling into place. And the locket? It was almost too perfect, pointing to Beatrice, but really tying back to Margaret. Précisément, Poirot said. The locket with Rose's photograph was Margaret's attempt to shift suspicion, to suggest Lady Beatrice's involvement, but it was too personal, too tied to her sister's memory. She could not resist its pull, and in that she revealed herself. The little gray cells, they see the pattern, the symmetry of human error. A knock at the door interrupted them, and Poirot's landlady, Mrs. Hudson, entered with a telegram. Poirot opened it, his eyes scanning the brief message. "From Inspector Japp," he said, his tone neutral. "Margaret Poole has been formally charged. She has confessed fully, and the evidence is secure. The case, it is officially closed." Hastings leaned back, a mix of relief and melancholy settling over him. Closed, but not forgotten. I wonder what'll become of Blackthorn Manor now. Will Beatrice ever host another gala? Poirot's smile was enigmatic. Perhaps in time, mon ami. The manor, it is a place of beauty, but also of memory. Lady Beatrice will carry on, but the Ghoul Gala, it will remain a ghost in her halls, a reminder of the fragility of trust and the power of secrets. He rose, adjusting his cuffs with characteristic precision. "Come, Hastings. The day is young, and London it calls. There are other puzzles, other stories waiting for Hercule Poirot." Hastings stood, his heart lighter but still touched by the weight of the case. As they stepped into the bustling streets, the city's energy enveloped them, a reminder that life continued even after tragedy. Blackthorn Manor was a memory now, its spectral slaughter resolved, but its lessons of love, vengeance, and the relentless pursuit of truth would linger in Hastings' mind, a testament to Poirot's genius and humanity. The final curtain had fallen on the Ghoul Gala, but for Poirot and Hastings the stage was never truly empty, always ready for the next act in the endless drama of human nature.